Chapter 860 Summoning the Abyss Guardian. Summoning the Abyss Gate. More than 4 billion soldiers, and more than 80 immortals flew out of the 18 galaxy at the same time. What kind of visual impact was that? To the monster faction in the fog in the distance, it was as if 18 gates between worlds had suddenly opened in the distant sky, and a large number of creatures from the other worlds had charged out of the gates between worlds, wanting to kill and plunder this world. Not to mention the ordinary life forms who were struggling at death's door nearby, and did not dare to make a sound. Even the 5 billion fog monsters and hundreds of scarlet god spirits were stunned, so much so that the temporary commander of the fog monster army immediately ordered the army to stop advancing and prepare to observe the situation. After a full 15 minutes, more than 4 billion blazing Sun Kingdom troops and more than 80 god spirits flew out of the galaxy. They were all flying in the sky. Those who could fly naturally used their own flying skills, and those who were too weak to fly were using external flying equipment like the Fear Falcon's wings. Zhou also flew out. Then he first took out the pillar of the Empire puppet and summoned the Lord of the Empire, Gerard, who was at the high-tier deity level intermediate grade. Then, with a thought, he summoned a high-tier deity level advanced grade purple jade heavenly king snake god through his affinity with the Gu god of the 10,000 Gu Emperor clan bloodline. This snake god had not appeared since he dealt with the Black Dragon Emperor's remnant soul last time. When he appeared again, he looked at Zhou warmly. Then, he looked at the fog monster army in the distance before he was deceived. Not to mention the 5 billion fog monster army. The astonishing aura of the hundreds of scarlet god spirits was clearly displayed in his perception. What's going on? Is this a racial war? Why did this kid, a legendary tier human, experience such a ridiculous battle? Previously, he had dealt with the remnant soul of a true god tier black dragon. This time, it was not a remnant soul, but a direct racial war? Good lad, giving me the high-end game. The purple jade heavenly king snake god turned around and looked at Zhou resentfully. If he hadn't seen that there were many powerful god spirits in this kid's camp, he wouldn't have stayed here to wade in the muddy water. Gu god affinity only allowed him to protect Zhou appropriately after being summoned. There was no need for him to protect him with his life. As the guardian of the 10,000 Gu race, if he really felt that the situation was not right, he could escape. Ahem. Help me, big brother snake. Zhou saw the purple jade heavenly king snake god's gaze and understood its thoughts. He said awkwardly. The purple jade heavenly king snake god did not say anything and only nodded. He turned to look at the fog monsters and the scarlet god spirit, his gaze gradually turning cold. Zhou took a deep breath when he saw this. Then, he formed a hand seal and chanted a spell. Then he suddenly opened his eyes and pulled his hands to the sides. Bang! With a tearing sound, a spatial rift actually appeared in the space behind Zhou. Right on the heels of that, another crash sounded. The spatial rift suddenly shattered. Then, a black demon dog that was more than 2,000 meters tall and burning with dark purple hell flames poked its head out of the shattered space and looked at the world in front of it with a ferocious and greedy expression. It was Levis, the mid-tier deity-level advanced grade abyssal demon hound god spirit that Zhou had summoned with his talent in summoning abyssal guardians. This racial talent of the first demon that summoned the abyss guardian could at most summon an abyss life form 2 realms higher than him to protect him. On the surface, Zhou's current strength was at the legendary tier advanced grade, so he could only summon this mid-tier deity-level abyssal demon hound that was Levis. Greetings, Holy Sun! After the abyss demon hound Levis walked out of the spatial rift, it retracted its ferocious appearance and stood obediently beside Zhou. He was clearly thousands of times larger than Zhou, but he acted like a good dog in front of Zhou. Zhou was not surprised by this situation. He had a large amount of abyssal providence, obtained the inheritance of the first demon deep abyss, and was protected by the abyss will. It was no exaggeration to say that if Zhou entered the abyss now, as long as he displayed the might of his bloodline in front of the super existences in the abyss, those super existences would probably immediately think that he had encountered the illegitimate son of the abyss will. Even though the Abyss demon hound Levis was famous in the Abyss, and was even related to one of the three giants of the Abyss, the Chaos Demon Hound, he had to treat a special existence like Jojo carefully. Moreover, he also felt an extremely obvious fatal threat from Jojo. It was as if the other party could easily end his life the moment he attacked. Under such a situation where he had both background and strength, he was naturally extremely fawning over Jojo. Jojo did not stand on ceremony with the abyssal guardian he had summoned. Later, I'll work with my people to deal with these fog monsters. He pointed at the fog monster in the distance and ordered, "All right, Holy Sun." Levis smiled obsequiously and looked at the forces of the monster army in the distance. His four lackeys could not help but tremble. He turned to look at Jojo and found that he was expressionless and had no intention of joking. He could only fly forward and stay with Heros and the other high-tier deity levels, acting like an obedient and harmless dog. Heros and the other high-tier deity-level god spirits looked at the abyssal demon hound with strange expressions. However, they also knew that he had been summoned by their lord, so they didn't say anything and let he stay by their side. Sun Wukong, Yang Jian Neza, the god of Silver Star Knights, the immortal hermit of the South Pole, the god of puppets, the high priest of soul summoning, at this moment, they also looked at Jojo in surprise. They originally thought that they had already thought too highly of this king. They had never expected that King of the Blazing Sun's summoning would once again suppress them. With a wave of his hand, he summoned two top-notch high-tier deity-level experts and a mid-tier deity-level expert to fight for him. Probably only a god spirit with a great contract nomological path could probably only reach this standard, right? However, at this moment, Jojo did something that shocked everyone again. He clasped his hands together and closed his eyes. Boom! A mysterious purple door that was 1,000,000 meters tall and 100,000 meters wide quietly appeared behind Jojo. There were many myths and legends engraved on the surface of the mysterious door. There were demons invading the world, abyssal demonic chi rising, god spirits fighting each other, and even will-level existences fighting each other. All kinds of purple engravings were engraved on the door. Just looking at them made them feel dazed. They could not help but have negative thoughts of violence, killing, jealousy, hatred, and so on. The Abyssal Gate. Many god spirits who saw this scene recognized the origin of this mysterious door. It was the official means of war used by the Abyss to invade the myriad worlds. The Abyssal Gate. Chapter 861 Spreading in the Myriad Worlds. If the Abyssal Gate appeared in a certain world, it often meant that this world was about to face the official invasion of the Abyssal world. If they were lucky, the native life forms of this world might have barely repelled the Abyssal invaders under the invasion of the Abyssal life forms and saved the world that had already become a scene of devastation. However, most of the time, the worlds that were officially invaded by the Abyssal Gate were not very lucky. It was a light punishment for the people to suffer and be consigned to eternal damnation. The most terrifying thing was that once the invasion of the Abyss was successful, this world would also be transformed into the Abyss world by the Abyss will. When the time comes, not only the world itself, even the life forms born in this world would gradually transform into Abyss life forms from their bodies to their hearts, and collectively throw themselves into the arms of the Abyss will. The Abyss will was said to have the endless Abyss world, and could even resist the endless heavens without being at a disadvantage. Most of the Abyssal worlds and Abyssal life forms were actually transformed from normal worlds that had successfully invaded. However, what did they see at this moment? The King of the Blazing Sun, who they had specially come to protect, had actually used the Abyssal Gate that only Abyssal god spirits could set up. These god spirits, especially the gods from the Night Temple and the Night Empire, were all stunned. The Yellow Emperor and the other true god tiers, who were watching the battle in the dark, were also stunned for a moment, before looking at Baihe in unison. The corners of Baihe's mouth twitched twice before he spoke with a helpless expression. This kid's methods are getting more and more complicated. He even used the methods of the Abyss. Even so, he did not hate the current Jojo. When using methods, they would be righteous. When using evil, they would be evil. They were naturally not superficial people who would kill everything in one go. Little friend Blazing Sun seems to have changed his profession to demon hunter. If I'm not wrong, this method to summon the abyssal gate should be a supplement to the demon hunter class. The Yellow Emperor's eyes were extremely sharp, and he could see through a portion of the abyssal gate at a glance. Demon hunter. No wonder. But he suddenly understood. I was wondering why Zhou suddenly asked me for the corpse of a high-level demon. It turns out that he wants to change his profession to a demon hunter. However, even though this profession's combat strength is formed very quickly, there are also huge hidden dangers. But he frowned slightly. There shouldn't be any problems. Patriarch Lu looked at Zhou carefully and pointed out. His body doesn't show any characteristics of demonization. He should have become a demon hunter, who can perfectly control the power of demons. There won't be any hidden dangers with such a perfect demon hunter. Ever since Patriarch Lu rose to prominence, he had spent most of his time traveling the myriad worlds. He had only returned recently to save Bai He. His broad knowledge still convinced Bai He and the Yellow Emperor. That's good. Bai He heaved a sigh of relief. In his eyes, Zhou was the hope of humanity's future rise. He did not wish for Zhou to have any hidden dangers that would affect his future. Speaking of demon hunters, that's the only person who can perfectly transform a person into a demon hunter, right? The Yellow Emperor suddenly thought of something and asked Bai He, "Is it Geralt?" Bai He nodded thoughtfully. "If I'm not wrong, it should be him. He should be the one presiding over Zhou's demon hunter class change ceremony." That child, what a pity. The Yellow Emperor sighed. This child's father is the #1 demon hunter of the human race, and his mother is the #1 witch of our human race. This child has had astonishing potential since he was young. Originally, according to normal circumstances, he should have been able to successfully grow into a pillar of our human race. He might even be a high-level member of our human race now. If Zhou hadn't appeared, the position of the 6th counselor might have been him. Who would have thought? A single adventure caused both Geralt's parents to die in the hands of Demon Lord Demogorgon. But he pursed his lips. Demon Lord Demogorgon was a demon at the Master God tier level, and was also the master of an ancient and powerful divine kingdom. He could be considered an overlord faction in the myriad worlds. Such an enemy, even if they knew that there was a deep hatred between them, they did not dare to take revenge on each other. He might feel aggrieved, but there was nothing he could do. Ever since that child found out that his parents had died in the abyss, he changed his profession to a demon hunter alone, and entered the abyss alone to train. I remember that the last time a human god spirit saw him, he had already become a high-tier deity-level god spirit. I originally wanted to invite him to join the Supreme Council of the human race, but I didn't expect him to reject me. Bai He smiled bitterly. Many humans wanted to join the human race's Supreme Council, but they could not. The fact that Geralt could make such a decision back then was really beyond the expectations of many upper echelons of the human race. However, they knew what the other party was thinking. Who asked them, the higher-ups of the human race, not to agree when they saw the child kneeling in front of them and begging them to save their parents' remains. They would probably have a sense of resentment towards them if they put themselves in his shoes. Fortunately, while this child had resentment in his heart, he did not develop hatred because of it. He was just unwilling to interact too much with the human race. Occasionally, he would even send some information about the abyss to the humans from the abyss, helping the Night Temple survive a few dangers of the abyss invasion. Hence, Bai He and the others, who knew about these things, actually quite liked Geralt, this tough child. Speaking of which, Zhou did not stop to rest when he summoned this huge abyssal gate. Instead, he cast another spell, and summoned a total of 7 abyssal gates. A total of 8 abyssal gates that emitted majestic might stood behind Zhou, making him look extremely mysterious and dignified. Some god spirits were even stunned, not to mention the soldiers. Soldiers and immortals. Prepare for battle. At this moment, Zhou's voice sounded in the hearts of all the soldiers and immortals. Here, he used the ability of the Master God tier law skill, Decisive Mind. Even though his current legendary tier advanced grade Chaos Holy Power could at most unleash the effect of a high-tier deity level. He could also convey his thoughts to all the soldiers and immortals. The soldiers and god spirits immediately pulled their attention back and focused on the vast number of fog monsters in the distance. At the same time, a voice suddenly came from the fog monster faction in the distance. This voice was low and serious, and there was an extremely deep arrogance hidden in his tone. When he spoke, the space seemed to tremble. He seemed to be an expert who was extremely accomplished in spatial laws. I am the current commander of the Scarlet Coalition Army, and the great general of the Archmage Scarlet Empire. At the same time, I am the Legion commander of the Forbidden Scarlet Legion. My name is Zel. Are you from the Lord faction under the King of the Blazing Sun? Has the King of the Blazing Sun come personally? The voice asked. I am the Lord of the Blazing Sun. Zhou did not hide his identity when he heard that. Even though the two of them were tens of millions of kilometers apart, his words easily reached the other party's camp. At the same time, as the scale of the battle had already exceeded 10 billion, there were nearly 200 god spirits. Therefore, even though they had not started the war, the space occupied by the soldiers before the war alone had reached more than 100 million square kilometers. On this huge battlefield, other than the native tribes that lived here, there were naturally lords of all races everywhere. Among these lords, there were humans, elemental races, mountain spirits, goblins, and even the territory of a lord of the descendant of the god spirit race. At this moment, they all looked at the two sides fighting in horror, feeling that the sky above their heads was about to collapse. At this moment, they all looked at the two sides fighting in horror, feeling that the sky above their heads was about to collapse. However, no matter how stupid they were, they could tell at this moment. Between these two forces, there was definitely no lack of experts who could destroy the world with one move. For small factions like them, that did not even have legendary tier experts, if they did not seize the opportunity to escape this place, the aftershocks of a casual battle between the higher-ups of the two sides would probably be enough to destroy them hundreds of times. For a moment, the tens of thousands of people of foreign races lord factions in the area covered by the battlefield began to migrate in panic, wanting to leave this troublesome place in the shortest time possible. When the King of the Blazing Sun and Zel conversed, the indigenous lord factions and the lord factions of the myriad races below immediately exploded when they heard the identities of the two parties in the conversation. They were in disbelief. Did they hear wrongly? King of the Blazing Sun? Wasn't he a lord of all races? The scale of the soldiers and experts in front of him did not look like it at all. People would probably believe that the lord faction he was facing was a high-level empire-level lord faction. It took them a while to come back to their senses. Then, as they continued to migrate out of the battlefield, they began to open the world channel of their race and spread this matter to the range of the races in words, screenshots, videos, and even live broadcasts. Chapter 862 Battle. King of the Blazing Sun TSK. I didn't expect you to really dare to come. Zel snorted with laughter. As the strongest lord of all races of the previous event, King of the Blazing Sun was naturally prepared before coming. Not to mention anything else, all of King of the Blazing Sun's public wars had been obtained as long as they could obtain them. They had also carefully studied them. The more they studied it, the more shocked they were. This was because they discovered that even though the King of the Blazing Sun was born a weak human, his growth speed was shockingly fast. Especially him, and the soldiers under him. How long had it been since he descended to the high continent? There were actually god spirits willing to work under Zhou, and there were quite a number of them. Even though they did not know how these gods bypassed the supreme agreement and became the worshipped god spirits of the Blazing Sun Kingdom, under normal circumstances, if a country wanted to nurture the local god spirits in their country, it was impossible for each of them to nurture them for hundreds or thousands of years. These god spirits could not be native god spirits nurtured by the Blazing Sun Kingdom. However, from this, they understood why high-level bloodline lords like the original spirit race, the Chaos Gods race, and the Shepherd's God race, who had deep foundations, could not compete for the King of the Blazing Sun. The others were still at the extraordinary tier and epic tier levels, but on King of the Blazing Sun's side, there were many high-tier deity-level god spirits. The two sides were no longer opponents on the same level. Even if they had more foundation and could take out any fancy things, it was useless in the face of the true difference in strength. Facing such an opponent, they had also prepared for a long time, and only came to look for the King of the Blazing Sun after confirming that they were confident of winning. They did not expect that the King of the Blazing Sun had already come knocking on their door before they could even start looking for him. This was simply a gift delivered to their doors. As long as they captured King of the Blazing Sun, the difficulty of this war could be said to have decreased by 80%. Even if they ignored the soldiers of the Blazing Sun Kingdom and directly turned around to retreat after taking down the Blazing Sun Queen, the masters of the factions behind them would be satisfied with their gains and give them a huge reward. Demon Eye King, hurry up and take down King of the Blazing Sun. As long as you can take down King of the Blazing Sun, it'll apply to the king when I return. Not only will you be exonerated of your previous crimes, it'll also reward you with cultivation resources to advance to the true god tier. Zel suddenly roared. Is what you said true? A dark but excited voice suddenly sounded from all directions. Of course it's true. Ha 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 ha. All right. I'll take down the King of the Blazing Sun first. As soon as he finished speaking, a pair of huge eyes that were more than 1,000 kilometers tall suddenly appeared in the sky. Its eyes were red, and its pupils were vertical. There seemed to be all kinds of pain, torture, resentment, and other negative emotions hidden in its eyes. Thick nomological aura fluctuated in all directions from its surface. It was a high-tier deity-level law skill, Demon Eye Slave God. As a high-tier deity-level advanced grade god spirit, the Demon Eye King had once used this law skill to enslave 3 opposing high-tier deity-level god spirits. He had even used this law skill to dodge the pursuit of a true god tier's divine power clone. The method of being hit was also very simple. As long as an enemy stared at by the Demon Eye Slave God dared to look at this pair of demon eye directly, they would be affected. At this moment, his demon eyes were more than 1,000 kilometers tall. Such a large-scale law skill. Not to mention Zhou. Even most of the other soldiers subconsciously looked at this pair of demonic eyes. If not for the fact that the Demon Eye Slave God's move was a pure single-target enslavement attack, all the soldiers and god spirits would have been hit at this moment. It was precisely because he knew how powerful this move was. Therefore, at the moment he attacked, whether it was Zel, Demon Eye King, or other existences who knew the details of this law skill, they all felt that the King of the Blazing Sun would definitely be enslaved by the Demon Eye King. Some of the Scarlet God spirits were even envious. The war had yet to officially begin, but this greatest credit was actually going to be snatched away by the Demon Eye King. But at this moment, a scream suddenly came from the sky. Then, the corpse of a Scarlet God spirit that was more than 1,000 meters tall fell from the sky and landed in front of Zel and the other Scarlet God spirits around him. It also seemed to have smashed into the faces of these Scarlet God spirits, giving them a loud slap. The Scarlet God spirits looked at Demon Eye King Luro's corpse with ugly expressions. This high-level lord of the Crimson Kingdom was a famous Scarlet God spirit, even among high-tier deity-level existences. At this moment, not only were his eyes bleeding, but his soul had already been destroyed and his aura was gone. All the fog monster factions and all the Scarlet God spirits immediately fell silent when they saw this scene. At the same time, Zhou looked at the text notification that suddenly appeared in front of him with a strange expression. You have killed a high-tier deity-level advanced grade Scarlet God spirit Luro. Promotion energy plus 800 billion. Loots condensed. Blessing of the War God. You have obtained an additional 72 trillion promotion energy points. You're bold enough. Even the Master God tier Deep Abyss doesn't dare to attack me with his will when I achieve will like light. You're a high-tier deity-level Scarlet God spirit. How dare you? Zhou shook his head. At the same time, the soldiers on Zhou's side also saw the corpse of the Scarlet God spirit that had fallen from the sky in front of the array. The war had yet to begin, but a powerful Scarlet God Spirit, an advanced grade high-tier deity level, had died in front of the local array. The morale of the enemy fog monster soldiers immediately became a little dispirited. On the other hand, the soldiers on their side were invigorated, and their fighting spirits soared like flames. Even the god spirits, the Yellow Emperor Patriarch Lu, and the others who were watching the battle were shocked and smiled. Let's fight! Destroy this group of fog monsters. Zhou struck while the iron was hot, and immediately ordered calmly. Kill! When the more than 4 billion blazing Sun Kingdom soldiers heard Zhou's order, they immediately took advantage of their current momentum and roared as they charged at the allied army of fog monsters. The 8 abyssal gates behind Zhou also opened at this moment. A large number of abyssal demons began to surge out of every abyssal gate. Black Iron Tier Abyssal Worms, Yellow Gold Tier Heart-Seizing Demon, Diamond Tier Nature Devil Soul, an Extraordinary Tier Tanari Demon, Epic Tier Obirus Demon, Legendary Tier Ancient Demon. All kinds of demons surged out of the Abyss Gate like lunatics in an asylum. Then, under Zhou's orders, they charged at the fog monsters with fanaticism and fearlessness. Even though I didn't summon a god spirit level abyssal demon, because of my strength realm, with only abyssal demons legendary tier and below, the key is the volume. At this rate, the 8 abyssal gates should be able to summon 10 million abyssal demons, with varying strength every 10 minutes or so. This battle will take at least 10 hours or even more. At that time, these 8 abyssal gates will probably summon 600 to 700 million fog monsters. We're practically invincible in a protracted battle. Zhou could not help but sigh at the terrifying effect of the abyssal gate. No wonder the expressions of the life forms of the myriad worlds changed when they talked about the Abyss Invasion War. This abyssal gate alone was so terrifying. What about the other powerful invasion methods? Chapter 863 Killing a person in 10 steps. Not leaving a trace within 8,000 miles. At the same time, counterattack. Even though he knew that his soldiers' morale was behind the other parties at this time, Zell had no choice but to give the order to fight. He was confident in his soldiers. He had hard strength and trump cards. Even if he had to fight in a hurry, Zell was confident that he could defeat the other party. On the battlefield, even though the soldiers of both sides were very far away, it would only take an instant for the experts to meet and fight. Qi Xintian, Heros, Yang Jian, Sun Wukong, and the other strongest god spirits crossed thousands of kilometers in the blink of an eye and fought the scarlet high-tier deity-level god spirits that were charging over, or the sword Qi that filled the sky swept through the world, or the soaring divine fire burning in all directions, or perhaps the 3 sharp edges and 2 blades could cut through space, or the wish-fulfilling divine needle sweeping the 6 directions. The scarlet god spirit was not at a disadvantage either. As soon as the 2 sides fought, they entered a white-hot battle. Following closely behind the high-tier deity level were mid-tier deity level, low-tier deity level, and legendary level experts from both sides and so on. The last to fight were the middle and low-level soldiers with the largest number. In order to prevent themselves from being accidentally injured, they had a tacit understanding to leave a special battle area for those god spirit powerhouses, so that they could fight to their heart's content. They did not even dare to launch a sneak attack in the dark, afraid that a casual attack from these god spirits would destroy them in the blink of an eye. At the same time, when the 2 sides officially came into contact, Zhou also raised his right hand without hesitation and activated Insight Defection. The next second, an invisible fluctuation instantly enveloped the 5 billion scarlet fog monsters. A text notification appeared. Prompt: please choose the specific target you want to instigate Insight Defection. 1. Yellow Sky Scarlet Empire, Yellow Talisman Army, Imperial Level Scarlet Army. 2. Black Demon Scarlet Empire, Soul Absorbing Legion, Imperial Level Scarlet Legion. 3. Mage God Scarlet Empire, Taboo Legion Imperial Level Scarlet Legion. 4. Demonic Scarlet Empire Red Tide Legion, Kingdom Level Scarlet Legion. 5. Last Moon Scarlet Empire, Grey Moon Legion, Kingdom Level Scarlet Legion. Zhou's eyes narrowed. More than 200 options appeared in front of him. They were all from the Lord of the Scarlet Fog faction that had participated in this battle. His expression was calm. He was already prepared for this scene. Without hesitation, he chose the first Yellow Talisman Scarlet Army. As for the soul-absorbing demon spirit in the second soul-absorbing army, and the mage gods in the third Taboo Legion, these two soldier types were extremely evil and were criticized by others. Zhou did not want something like that to join his soldiers. He did not want them to turn around and harm his soldiers. Soon a text notification appeared. Prompt: you have activated your Lord exclusive talent, Insight Defection. Insight Defection has taken effect. Lord Talent Notification 1. There are a total of 136,005,522 white silver tier fog monsters, 53,666,590 yellow gold tier fog monsters, 31,686,399 white platinum tier fog monsters, 10,367,860 diamond tier fog monsters, 3,597,700 extraordinary tier fog monsters, 1,208,966 epic tier fog monsters, 11,540 legendary tier fog monsters, 3 low-tier deity level elementary grade scarlet god spirits, 1 mid-tier deity level intermediate god spirit has defected to you. Lord Talent Notification 2. You have obtained a spellcaster, Gaga legendary, tier advanced grade. Zhou looked at the Insight Defection report, and his eyes lit up. He almost laughed out loud. This legendary tier Insight Defection was indeed extraordinary. Not only did he directly insight 236,544,581 fog monsters, there were also 3 scarlet god spirits. Not bad, not bad. This was the first time he had incited an Insight Defection and obtained a scarlet god spirit. The Lord Talent Crystal Fragment he used to level up was not wasted. Now that his war had just begun, the number of soldiers had increased instead of decreasing. It had directly reached more than 4.5 billion, and the number of god spirits had directly broken through to as many as 15. It was really a wondrous scene in the world. This was not the end. Zhou ordered the fog monster soldiers to start fighting among themselves and cause internal strife among the 4 billion fog monster factions. Then, he turned to look at the Dragon Lady Lord, the Spiritual Medicine Lord, the Heavenly Commerce Lord, and more than 300 other lords behind him. All of you come and instigate the Insight Defection. Zhou smiled. He had already gotten what he wanted the most. Of course, he had to share the rest of the soup that he could not eat to avoid wasting it. Yes, the lords raised their right hands excitedly and activated Insight Defection. Large groups of fog monsters became soldiers under the lords as the Insight Defections were used one by one. Not long after, the fog monster factions were instigated by Insight Defection, about 5 billion fog monsters present, and about 1.6 billion fog monsters became Zhou and the lord's subordinates. Then under the same order, these fog monsters that had joined another faction turned around and began to fight crazily. The 5 billion fog monster factions were instantly in chaos because of these infighting fog monsters. Zell, who was guarding the rear, and a few other scarlet god spirits who did not go out to fight, immediately changed their expressions when they saw this scene. It's actually useless. Zell looked uncomfortable. Before they came, when they were studying Zhou's means of war, they naturally knew about Zhou's special ability to cause internal strife among the enemy. For this reason, they had specially invited several gods who were good at soul protection to make several group soul protection law skills for the entire army, thinking that this would make the other party's ability to lure in internal strife lose its effect. Unexpectedly, he still failed. Moreover, looking at the scale of this internal strife, it was clearly much larger than the results of their previous research. This king of the blazing sun has become stronger again. Zell held the gem in his hand and heaved a sigh of relief. His expression became calm again. This scene told them that even if they won in the end, the outcome would only be a tragic victory. However, as long as he could take down King of the Blazing Sun, Everything would be worth it. The look in Zell's eyes became firm. At this moment, he suddenly felt a sense of danger. Without thinking, he teleported and disappeared from the spot. Then, he appeared in the distant sky and looked down at the spot he was in. He saw a handsome human man carrying a blood sword on his back standing in his previous position and looking at him calmly. He only emitted the aura of a low-tier deity level elementary grade. However, the feeling that he gave him at this moment was not at all inferior to the feeling that the high-tier deity level advanced grade Scarlet God Spirit gave him. It was the Night Rakshasa Sword God Suan. At this moment, he didn't have any regrets after the assassination failed. He was a low-tier deity level elementary grade human god spirit after all. He could quietly barge into the enemy's rear alone and scare away the commander of the enemy's high-tier deity level advance grade with a single strike. In the eyes of outsiders, this was already a rather powerful achievement. Stop him. Zell's face turned red. He did not expect to be so frightened by a low-tier deity level elementary grade human god spirit. He immediately ordered the surrounding Scarlet God Spirits. In fact, there was no need for him to give the order. When the surrounding 4 Scarlet God Spirits saw this human god spirit actually appear in this location, they were first stunned. Then, they held various divine artifact-level weapons and charged at Suan with ferocious expressions. Those who stop me will die. Suan's eyes turned cold. He waved the blood shadow sword in his hand and drew out blood-colored sword shadows. He directly killed one of the mid-tier deity-level advanced grade Scarlet God Spirits and put his corpse into his spatial treasure. Then, under everyone's gaze, he directly turned invisible and disappeared. He had already appeared in front of another Scarlet God Spirit, below the mid-tier deity level 1,000 miles away, and silently assassinated it with a sword when he was next seen. Killing a person in 10 steps in 1,000 miles without leaving a trace. Good Suan. Chapter 864 Using the 9-headed Nightmare Realm Demon God's Heart. Ah, damn it. Zell's face was red with incompetence and anger. If he hadn't walked the path of spatial laws, and was abnormally sensitive to spatial fluctuations, and if he hadn't been good at life-saving and escape law skills like teleportation, he might have really fallen into the other party's trap. Furthermore, the other party did not succeed in assassinating him. Instead, he killed a mid-tier deity level from his side, took the corpse and left. Then, as if nothing had happened, he turned around and went to assassinate another Scarlet God Spirit. What's this? This was a complete disregard. How could he survive in front of the other Scarlet God Spirits after he returned in the future? Perhaps this matter would even be compiled into myths and legends in the future and circulate in the myriad worlds for countless years. Then he would be humiliated in history books. Kill. Gather all your strength and kill this human god spirit. Zell roared. At this moment, in order to protect his reputation, the thought of killing Suan was even on par with the extermination of the King of the Blazing Sun. Yes. Commander. The surrounding Scarlet God Spirits hurriedly said, and immediately flew in Suan's direction. When Zell saw this scene, while he was furious, he could not help but feel a little terrified. Based on this kid's attainments in stealth assassination, he knew that the other party's nomological comprehension in this aspect had definitely reached the level of a top high-tier deity level. Otherwise, it was impossible for him not to notice. And a mere low-level deity at such a young age actually had a law comprehension that surpassed his strength by so much. This could only prove that the other party was a super genius. This human's potential comprehension has definitely reached the true god tier. He might even be at the master god tier level. We have to kill him. Otherwise, the future supreme will definitely have another valiant general under his command. Zell made up his mind. It was different from the lords under the supreme who hid their ambitions and did their own things. The fog monsters under the Crimson Overlord were all created by the Crimson Overlord, so almost all of them were very loyal to it. There were even many fog monsters with Holy Spirit level faith. Apart from a few lords, most of the lords of the myriad races did not have much faith in the supreme will. Most of the lords of the myriad races had the same goal: survive and obtain greater strength and power. As for faith, many lords did not have this word in their dictionaries. It was the same for Zhou Zhou. He mostly treated himself as a worker or collaborator of the supreme will. By borrowing his strength, he could help he deal with the Crimson Overlord's faction, while improving himself. Speaking of which, Zell swept his gaze across the battlefield, and looked at the local god spirits of the Blazing Sun Kingdom, recorded in the intelligence. The more he looked at it, the more shocked he was. This was because he had discovered that there was no lack of geniuses like Suan among the native god spirits of the Blazing Sun Kingdom, who could fight above their level at the god spirit level. Could this Blazing Sun Kingdom be a lord faction personally established by the Supreme Will? Otherwise, why would there be so many geniuses? At the same time that his expression wasn't too good, he became even more determined to destroy the king of the Blazing Sun. When he saw Sun Wukong, Yang Jian, the god spirit of the Holy Land, and the others, he frowned slightly. These seemed to be the god spirits of the human race, and a few god spirits of the people of foreign races, who are on good terms with the human race. What price did the Blazing Sun Kingdom pay to actually invite so many god spirits to help? Zell was confused and angry. Without the help of these human god spirits, they would definitely be able to defeat the Blazing Sun Kingdom and eliminate the king of the Blazing Sun with their overwhelming number of god spirits. Even if they could do such a thing, they would probably have to pay a huge price. On the battlefield, after the lords used insight defection and obtained 1.6 billion fog monster soldiers, the military strength of both sides reversed. Zhou Zhou's military strength directly increased to 6.4 billion. The total military strength of the allied army of the fog monster faction had plummeted from 5 billion to about 3.4 billion. A wave of insight defection directly widened the gap by nearly half. Coupled with the internal strife of the allied army of the fog monster faction, the Blazing Sun Kingdom, which had just started the war, directly obtained an extremely obvious battlefield advantage. As for the battle between the god spirits on both sides, the Blazing Sun Kingdom's situation was also very good. There were more than 100 Scarlet God Spirits in the allied army of the Fog Monster faction. And among these Scarlet God Spirits, the ratio of mid-tier deity level and high-tier deity level God Spirits was very high. On the other hand, not only was the Blazing Sun Kingdom at a disadvantage in terms of the number of God Spirits, but they only had more than 80 God Spirits. Moreover, these God Spirits were generally lower middle-level God Spirits. Compared to the Scarlet God Spirits, the difference in strength was not small. Fortunately, they were all wearing divine artifacts. With the enhancement of the divine artifacts, they forcefully turned the disadvantageous situation into an advantageous situation. Facing this scene, Zell's eyes widened. Where did these god spirits get so many divine artifacts? Did they pick up a divine kingdom-level treasure? He roared in disbelief. Then, he immediately took out a flesh communication device and prepared to send this news to the other Scarlet factions. However, he paused slightly and had the thought of hiding this news. After all, as long as he won, it was very likely that the divine artifacts worn by these enemy god spirits would belong to them. And if this news was spread, it was uncertain if these divine artifacts would belong to him. He suddenly thought of something, and a helpless expression appeared on his face. He still sent the news honestly. With so many Scarlet Lord forces participating in this war, it was impossible to hide the news. But in the next moment, his expression immediately changed. This was because his flesh and blood communication device emitted a vibration and low hum. It was actually telling that the intelligence transmission had failed. What happened? He suddenly looked up at the sky before his pupils constricted slightly. At some point in time, a huge scarlet light barrier that covered an area of 50,000 kilometers appeared above them, enveloping all the soldiers, generals, god spirits, supplies, and war machines of both sides. A purple-black illusory creature with pitch-black wings and 9 heads stood on the scarlet light barrier, like a 9-headed demon horse. A 9-headed nightmare realm demon god? Zell's pupils constricted. He was extremely knowledgeable and could tell the origin of this illusory creature at a glance. Then, he carefully sensed the aura of the huge array formation before his expression suddenly changed. A true God-tier array. And it's a top-notch true God-tier array. He suddenly looked at Zhou in the distance. Even though there was a huge difference between the two sides, he could still see Zhou thousands of kilometers away at a glance. He was floating in the sky behind the army, holding an illusory heart that seemed to reflect countless dream worlds in his right hand. It was the nine-headed Nightmare Realm Demon God's heart, a true God-tier advanced-grade divine artifact. Chapter 865 Nine Worlds Divine Demon Dreamfall Array. Summon the spirit of the army formation. This nine-headed Nightmare Realm Demon God's heart was originally a high-tier deity-level advanced great array treasure, the nine-headed Nightmare Realm Demon God statue. From the information on its surface, he could only tell that it was a top-notch true God-tier divine artifacts that could summon a nine-headed nightmare demon god and make him agree to a reasonable wish within the paramount law. However, just like how the spatio-temporal region was the hidden ability of the sort of new dimension creation, as a top-notch array formation treasure, the nine-headed Nightmare Realm Demon God's heart's ability to set up formations was also hidden. As the upgraded version of the nine-headed Demon God statue, the nine-headed Nightmare Realm Demon God's heart was no longer a high-tier deity's nine-headed Nightmare Realm Demon God's heart. Instead, it was a top-notch formation of true gods and advanced grades, the Nine Worlds Demon God Dreamfall formation. According to the ability of this array formation, if it was used to the limit, even if 10 true gods descended, they would be trapped in the Nine Worlds Demon God Fallen Dream Array. It would even cause true God-tier existences to fall into an eternal dream. With the help of the dream power, they could even kill them, which meant this array formation had the shocking offensive ability to kill more than one true God-tier. Even though Zhou could not reach that level with his current strength, it was more than enough to trap people. This King of the Blazing Sun actually has true God-tier divine artifacts. From the looks of it, he also has an existence at the true God-tier level behind him. He thinks highly of him, and even supports him. However, what did he do to make the Supreme Agreement agree to let this human lord possess a true God-tier now? Aklzel thought for a moment, and stopped thinking about it. No matter how powerful a true God-tier divine artifact that leaned towards imprisonment and sealing was, it was ultimately not as effective as an offensive-type divine artifact. Which meant the chances of winning were still in his hands. Thinking of this, Aklzel immediately stopped panicking, and a faint smile even appeared on his lips. Pass down the order. Don't hide it. Let the Legion commanders use their military formations. Don't let a human lord like the King of the Blazing Sun look down on us. Aklzel smiled faintly. Yes, Commander-in-Chief. A light blue scarlet god spirit nodded. Then, he took out his flesh and blood communication device and issued an order to all the Legion commanders. In the sky, the Legion commander of the Forbidden Legion of the Archmage Scarlet Empire was the first to know of the order. Hee, you should have done this long ago. He sneered at the soldiers and god spirits of the Blazing Sun Kingdom. Then, he shouted crazily, Source of Impurity Formation! Summon the Great Abhos. A total of 10 million taboo images below the god spirit level gathered at this moment. They wore grayish-black mage hoods and grayish-black mage robes, completely covering their faces and bodies. Then, they held the forbidden book in their hands and chanted twisted and crazy forbidden incantations. Wisps of pale blue water vapor emitted from their bodies as they chanted forbidden incantations, then gathered above their heads, forming a pale blue water vapor that was tens of millions of kilometers wide and covered the surface of the water vapor. It looked like a stinky rotten armor that covered the sky. He was surrounded by darkness. Ominous water vapor filled the surroundings and constantly expanded and contracted, as if it was breathing. Moreover, every breath was accompanied by an extreme stench. It was the source of impurity, Abhos. Abhos was a taboo god, and was also a direct subordinate of the Crimson Overlord. He was a true god-tier existence. The god spirit that he had summoned was only a projection of him. Then, two more high-tier deity-level advanced grade projections of the source of impurity summoned the 20 million Scarlet God Spirits. At this moment, 3 high-level high-tier deity-level experts appeared out of thin air on the battlefield. This was not the end. After receiving the order from Zell, the other Empire-level Scarlet Legions and Kingdom-level Scarlet Legions that controlled the military formations also gathered soldiers and set up the military formations they controlled. In less than a moment, there were a total of 110 God Spirit-level army spirits on the battlefield. As for the army formation formed by low-level soldiers, the number of spirits summoned by the lowest extraordinary tier and highest legendary tier army had reached more than 1 million. In the current situation, even though the total number of soldiers of the allied army of the Fog Monster faction had decreased, however, the number of experts suddenly increased by more than 1 level. The God Spirits of the Blazing Sun Kingdom, who had originally relied on the advantage of the number of divine artifacts to greatly suppress the Scarlet God Spirits, faced the increase in the number of Scarlet God Spirits at this moment, and found it difficult to move again. Generals, listen up! Set up the array formation with me. Bai Yin also shouted angrily at this moment. Set up the array. Build the Greedy Wolf Howling Moon array. Set up the Small God Sura Myriad Spirit Army formation. Army God formation. Over 10,000 generals roared. Then, more than 1 billion soldiers came near them under their orders to set up the array. Most of these soldiers were only at the white-silver tier level. Only 2 million soldiers were at the extraordinary tier level, and 100,000 soldiers were at the epic tier level. Right on the heels of that, these soldiers set up the Greedy Wolf Howling Moon array, the Small God Sura Myriad Spirit Army formation, and the Weapon God Army formation. Among them, there were more than 10,000 Greedy Wolf Howling Moon arrays, formed by white-silver tier soldiers. From this, they summoned more than 10,000 spirits of the Greedy Wolf Avatar Army that had the strength of the extraordinary tier limit. As for the 2 million extraordinary tier soldiers, they summoned the spirits of 20 Sura swordsman formations with the strength of the low-tier deity level intermediate grade. The remaining 100,000 epic tier soldiers summoned 10 soldier god army spirits with the strength of low-tier deity level advanced grade. After they took shape, the spirit of the strongest soldier god army led the charge at the Fog Monster army with all kinds of battlefield weapons with a murderous aura. Tens of thousands of Greedy Wolf avatars followed closely behind. Meanwhile, the Sura swordsmen stood behind the Blazing Sun Kingdom's army and continuously fired Shimra sword aura to attack the soldiers of the Fog Monster faction from afar. Every Shimra sword aura required 1,000 legendary tier mist cores to be released. But now, the spirits of the 10 Sura swordsman army seemed to be free as they crazily attacked the Fog Monster army. On average, 10 Shimra sword chi attacked the Scarlet God spirits every second, which meant, every second, 10,000 legendary tier mist core were consumed. However, even though the consumption was huge, the effect was also very obvious. Facing the sudden appearance of 30 god spirits, and the continuous Shinra sword chi that shot over from behind, the sudden increase in the number of god-tier god spirit army spirits on the side of the Fog Monster faction was actually unable to cause too much damage to the army of the Blazing Sun Kingdom for a moment. They even fought equally with the god spirits of the Blazing Sun Kingdom, and did not give in to each other. When Zhou saw this scene, he naturally did not feel sorry for the consumption of the Sura swordsman's mist core. He only felt a little dissatisfied and regretful. What a pity! The time given to the soldiers is still too short. If my soldiers can be nurtured by the Reincarnation Sacred Palace for a few more days, they will definitely be able to nurture more generals who control military formations. This way, they can summon more god spirit level army spirits. This way, we can deal with the current situation more calmly, Zhou said with regret. Chapter 866 True God Tier Elementary Grade Divine Artifact Demon Abyss Spiderweb. On the battlefield, the two sides fought very anxiously. Ever since the allied army of the Fog Monster faction summoned 110 god spirit level army spirits, the total number of god spirits under Zell had already reached more than 200. Coupled with the million army spirits below the legendary tier level, The originally powerful Fog Monster Alliance army's strength increased greatly in the blink of an eye. Even though the god spirits of the Blazing Sun Kingdom were all wearing a complete set of divine artifacts that could be used by one god spirit, in addition to Bai Yun and the others summoning 30 god spirit level army spirits, and more than 10,000 extraordinary tier greedy wolf avatars. However, it was still a little inadequate to deal with the Fog Monster Lord faction that had increased in strength. This caused the god spirits to fall into an obvious disadvantage on the battlefield. Even though there had yet to be any incidents of god spirits dying, there had already begun to be frequent injuries to god spirits. However, the only good news was that with the appearance of a large number of army spirits, they immediately had a greater advantage in terms of the number of soldiers. After the soldiers of the Blazing Sun Kingdom eliminated all the soldiers of the Fog Monster faction, they could turn around and deal with these Scarlet God Spirits. Facing the siege of more than 6 billion soldiers, even the Scarlet God Spirits would be injured, or even in danger of dying if they were not careful. This is a priority if we want the God Spirits in our camp to last until our soldiers deal with the other party's Fog Monster soldiers, before turning around to help the God Spirits in our camp. Jojo whispered, "Soldiers saving God Spirits?" It sounded unbelievable, but when the number of soldiers underwent a qualitative change, it became reality. At this thought, Jojo turned around and entered the galaxy. Then he took out a bundle of spider webs. This spider web was about 3 to 4 meters long. It was completely black and emitted a strange purple-black light. It moved restlessly in Jojo's hands, emitting a murderous aura, as if it wanted to rush out of the galaxy and go to the battlefield outside to kill wantonly. Jojo looked at the purple-black spider web, and a text notification appeared. Divine Artifact Name: Demon Abyss Spider Web. Divine Artifact Grade: True God Tier Elementary Grade. Divine Artifact Law 1, Spider God Domain. The Demonic Abyss Spider Web is the Spider God Queen Rose. With her own natal spider web as the core, she extracts and combines the purple slime, Demonic Abyss Evil Soil, Doomsday Ashes and other true God tier materials from the Demonic Abyss region. Materials to create a true artifact of imprisonment. Once spread out, it could extend an endless spider web that covered a radius of 1,000,000 kilometers and transformed it into a domain that the owner of the divine artifact could control. Any attack below the true God tier elementary grade would not be able to injure the Demon Abyss spider web. Divine Artifact Law 2, Lockdown of the Spider God Domain. When the God Punisher domain is activated, the Demon Abyss spider web will take root in space and seal the space within the Spider God domain. No life form in this range can use spatial law techniques at the level of true God tier elementary grade and below. The effect of spatial treasures will also be greatly weakened or even disappear. At the same time, within the domain, the flying speed of any life form and things below the true God tier elementary grade will be reduced by 90%. It will also have a certain effect on the flying speed of life forms and things above the true God tier. Divine Artifact Law 3, Poison of the Spider God Domain. Within the range of the Demonic Abyss Spiderweb's domain, there is a kind of intrinsic poisonous fog personally created by the Spider God Empress Lorsi. Enemy God spirits in the range of the domain will be affected by the poisonous fog, and the efficiency of the energy circulation in their bodies will be reduced by 10 to 50%. At the same time, this poisonous fog will also cause a long-lasting corrosive poison to the body and soul of the enemy life form. The longer it is affected by the intrinsic poisonous fog, the greater the damage the enemy life form will suffer until its life ends. At the same time, only the master of the divine artifact can remove the damage of this poisonous fog without any side effects. Divine Artifact Law 4, Creation of the Dark Poison Spider. When the master of the divine artifact uses the Demon Abyss web, he can use the enemy's corpse as an embryo. By consuming divine power, he can create an uneven number of dark poison spiders. This dark poison spider can exist permanently. Its strength is equivalent to the strength of the embryo type. The highest is not below the true God tier. Currently, there can be at most 20 darkness poison spiders on the Demonic Abyss spider web at the same time. This was one of the 12 true God-tier elementary-grade divine artifacts that Zhou had obtained from extracting the corpse of the Queen of Spiders, Lorcy. He had never used it before. Now this battlefield was the time for it to shine. Therefore, Zhou took it out without hiding any thoughts. "Spread out the spider god domain," he ordered in a low voice. The next second, the demonic abyss spider web in his hand gradually turned ethereal and disappeared. As the master of the divine artifact, he clearly sensed it. This demonic abyss spider web did not disappear. Instead, it was hidden in space and expanded crazily in all directions. In the blink of an eye, it covered an area of 1,000,000 miles. This action that affected the entire battlefield should have attracted the attention of countless life forms and god spirits. However, at this moment, apart from the Yellow Emperor Lu Zhen, Bai He, and the other true god tiers who were secretly observing, they vaguely realized that something was wrong with the battlefield. The god spirits on the other battlefield, including Wuxia, the commander-in-chief of the Fog Monsters Force high-tier deity level advanced grade, actually did not realize that they had already fallen into the range of the demon abyss spiderweb. Zhou was not surprised. They were true god-tier divine artifacts used by true god-tier god spirits after all. If it was casually discovered by a group of gods below the true god tier, it would be too unworthy of its quality. Activate the spider god domain's seal. Activate the poison of the spider god domain. Zhou continued to give orders to the demon abyss spider web without hesitation. The next second, he felt the chaotic sacred power in his body crazily surge towards the demon abyss spider web like a flood that had broken through a dam. His expression changed, and he immediately used the white platinum tier law skill, King. At this moment, the power of 100 subjects gathered on Zhou. Among the 100 subjects, other than all the god spirits in the Blazing Sun Kingdom, the remaining spots would be filled by top-notch legendary tier experts. Boom! In almost the blink of an eye, Zhou's strength had increased to the high-tier deity level advanced grade. It had even reached the level where he could use more than 20 full-strength attacks comparable to a low-tier true god-tier elementary grade expert. In terms of the reserves of the chaotic sacred power, at this moment, the chaotic sacred power in Zhou's body was more than 10,000 times that of the legendary tier advanced grade. The chaos holy power that had surged into the demon abyss spiderweb just now was as easy as a drop in the ocean for Zhou. He calmly allowed the chaotic sacred power in his body to continuously surge into the demon abyss spiderweb. It only stopped when he could perfectly use the two divine artifact laws, the spider god domain's seal, and the spider god domain's poison. At this moment, there was still more than 60% of the chaotic sacred power in his body. With the help of the true god tier divine artifacts, it was not a problem to release more than 10 full strength attacks at the true god tier level. On the battlefield, as the spider god domain was quietly activated, the expressions of the fog monster soldiers and scarlet god spirits who were fighting the soldiers and god spirits of the Blazing Sun Kingdom suddenly changed. Chapter 867 Spatial Rift Dimensional Cannon. They were shocked to discover that not only had their movement speed suddenly decreased greatly, but they could not use spatial magical techniques and spatial items. Moreover, they also saw a large amount of purple-black poisonous fog appear somewhere in the surrounding environment. The poisonous fog was uncontrollably sucked into their bodies. Not only did it affect the efficiency of the energy in their bodies, but it also greatly reduced their combat strength. They even realized that they were actually poisoned at this moment, and it was a high-level poison that they could not expel. These poisons were causing serious corrosive damage to their divine bodies at all times. If they could not find a way to remove the poison in a short period of time, they would probably be corroded to death by the poison from the inside out. At that time they instantly panicked. This was considered light. If the god spirits were poisoned, they could at least resist for a period of time with their powerful divine bodies and divine power. However, the spirits of those god spirits were different. They were originally spirit bodies constructed by non-god spirits through the power of array formations. At this moment, under the poisonous fog of the true god tier, not only were they suffering as spirit bodies, Even the fog monster soldiers who formed the spirit bodies were affected at this moment. Moreover, because they were not god spirits, their resistance to this god-tier poison was not as strong as that of god spirits. Therefore, not long after the poisonous fog began to spread in the spider god domain, large numbers of fog monster soldiers began to die one after another. Even the soldiers who formed the military formation under the protection of the army spirit did not recover much. At most they died a little later. Not long after these 110 god spirits appeared on the battlefield, they began to collapse one after another. After a while most of them actually died. Only the high-tier deity-level army spirit summoned by the 12 Empire-level Scarlet Legions could barely maintain its form. However, under the poisonous fog of the true god tier, they could not last long. What was completely different from them was that the soldiers and god spirits of the Blazing Sun Kingdom were not affected at all. On the contrary, seeing this scene, the god spirits of the Blazing Sun Kingdom immediately decided not to let go of this excellent opportunity and immediately counterattacked. In less than 2 hours, the Blazing Sun Kingdom easily regained the advantage on the battlefield. Thick spatial power erupted, forming a spatial passageway with endless suction behind it, directly sucking it into the spatial rift. Zell's expression instantly turned ugly. He never expected that the spirits of the more than 100 god spirits that they had summoned were not destroyed by the other party's gods. Instead, they were destroyed by them in this way. This poisonous fog is... Zell's nose twitched slightly, and then his expression changed drastically. He hurriedly held his breath and closed all the energy exchange between himself and the outside world. However, it was useless. This true god-tier elementary-grade poisonous fog was not something a high-tier deity-level advanced-grade god spirit like he could withstand at all. He could only watch with widened eyes as the poisonous fog seeped into his body as if he had entered an uninhabited place, causing continuous corrosive damage to his body. Soon, he sensed it. I'm considered top-notch even among the top high-tier deity-level advanced-grade god spirits. But it still can't stop the infiltration and damage of this poisonous fog. Could this poisonous fog be a true god-tier poisonous fog? Zell looked horrified. He had to admit that he had miscalculated. He did not expect King of the Blazing Sun to also have such an offensive true god-tier method. Moreover, it was a large-scale offensive method. This was much stronger than single-target offensive methods in war. Tell the Scarlet Legion to use their respective war machines. Also, bring the Spatial Rift Dimensional Cannon. Blow up the army of the Blazing Sun Kingdom. Zell said decisively. I have to defeat the King of the Blazing Sun quickly. Only then can I obtain the antidote for the poisonous fog from him. Otherwise, we can only return to our world and find those true god-tier lords to ask them for solutions. He thought of those adults. Zell's face twitched slightly. If it was possible, he really didn't want to face those true god-tier level lords. After all, those lords were too terrifying. Putting aside whether he could resolve his problem after meeting them once, he would definitely shed a layer of skin first. In order to prevent him from suffering, he had to do everything he could to take down the King of the Blazing Sun and the Blazing Sun Kingdom as soon as possible. Yes, Commander-in-Chief, the surrounding legendary tier Scarlet Generals immediately left after hearing Zell's order. A moment later, a total of 100,000 exquisite silver cannons made of spatial gems were brought up. Each of their cannons emitted a faint spatial fluctuation, giving people a feeling that they did not exist in this space. Gunner, get ready. Fire. Accompanied by the Fog Monster General's order, the 100,000 spatial rift dimensional cannons immediately shook. It looked like they had released some cannonballs, but there was no sound at all. At the same time, 10,000 miles away, in the army of the violent storm spirit that was casting storm spells at the back of the battlefield, cannon points suddenly appeared in the space. At a glance, there were more than 100,000 of them. Then, with these 100,000 cannon points as the center, they began to continuously spread rings of spatial ripples in all directions. In the blink of an eye, they covered an area of 50,000 kilometers. Wherever the spatial ripples affected, the violent storm spirits in the range were all affected by the spatial ripples. At best, they were injured and vomited blood. At worst, their bodies were twisted and broken, looking very tragic. Thick spatial power erupted, forming a spatial passageway with endless suction behind it, directly sucking it into the spatial rift. Not far away, the clergyman of the shelter of the goddess of life immediately wanted to run over and treat these soldiers. But they were stopped by a low-level life clergyman in the lead. Don't go over. It's in the bombardment area of the space bombardment. Our bodies are not even as strong as these violent storm spirits who have mastered elementalization. Even though they are injured. But if we go over, not only will we not be able to save anyone, we will definitely die. Treat those you can treat remotely for now. Those who cannot treat remotely, don't be rash. Remember, as healers, our first principle on the battlefield is to protect ourselves. Our second principle is to save the soldiers. He ordered with a solemn expression. Yes, Cardinal. The clerics who had mastered healing abilities listened to the order. The cardinal-level life clergyman nodded and did not say anything. He directly began to use his divine art to remotely treat the soldiers who were injured by the violent spatial ripples. In the spaceship, when Jojo saw this, he nodded slightly in his heart. Carol Moella's subordinates were not bad. At least they didn't rush forward stupidly. In that case, he might lose a batch of medical talents. Then, his gaze landed on the 100,000 spatial rift dimensional cannons. My demonic abyss spider web can greatly suppress spatial abilities and items. Under such circumstances, these war machines can still unleash such shocking power. Without the suppression of the demon abyss spider web, wouldn't these cannons be able to shatter a large spatial area at will? This power, is it a god-tier war machine? Jojo's eyes lit up. His territory lacks such god-tier war machines. Chapter 868 Dawn. After a long night, Jojo's territory had already developed to a level of wealth that far exceeded the current stage in terms of war resources and the number of soldiers. But in terms of war machinery, his progress was rather slow. Even though his territory had many abilities and items related to assisted development and creation, such as the heart of the craftsman, his territory was developing too quickly. Even if the craftsmen in his territory were like Luban and Tesla, they could not catch up to the development speed of his territory. Currently, the item with the highest achievement in war machinery in his territory was a super weapon that was being developed. This super weapon, which was regarded as a nuclear peace envoy on the cerulean planet, should be comparable to a low-level deity's attack once it was developed and used in war. There was no need to think about the power of a true god tier. The destructive power of a casual strike from a true god tier could reach more than 10,000 kilometers. Earth's diameter was only a little more than 10,000 kilometers. If a true god tier were to be placed on Earth, he could easily split the Earth in half with a casual strike. Super weapons wouldn't be able to catch up, even if they developed for another 100 years. In another 1,000 years, a few more technological revolutions might be possible. However, Jojo had already arranged for these researchers who studied super weapons to enter the time world and use the extremely high time flow difference to conduct weapons research. The results should be visible after a while. He looked at the dimensional cannons for a few seconds before looking at the violent storm spirits camp again. Just for a moment, hundreds of millions of violent storm spirit soldiers had already been injured or even killed by the 100,000 spatial rift dimensional cannons. The clergymen in the distance could only feel anxious when they saw this scene. Jojo did not hesitate when he saw this. He injected a little chaotic sacred power into the demon abyss spiderweb again, and strengthened the spatial stability of the area where the violent storm spirit soldiers were. After a while, the invisible spatial cannonballs that were shot out by the spatial rift dimensional cannons could not even cause any spatial ripples after landing on the position of the violent storm spirit, let alone harm the soldiers. When the clergy saw this, their expressions immediately became excited. Then, they hurriedly rushed over to treat the soldiers' injuries and revive them. When Jojo saw this scene, he fell into deep thought. This cannon should be a god spirit level war machine. But in terms of power, it should only be at the legendary tier level. However, in terms of the range of influence, due to the spatial characteristics, it can compare to the attack range of a low-tier deity level. A spatial rift dimensional cannon can radiate 100 kilometers of space, especially when 100,000 cannons are fired at the same time. In a war, the killing range is comparable to 1,000,000 legendary tier experts. Zhou nodded slightly. This kind of cannon looked like nothing if used alone. However, once the numbers were accumulated, there would be more than 10,000 or even 100,000 of them. Their lethality on the battlefield could be said to be destructive to ordinary life forms. It could be seen from the fact that more than 100 million violent storm spirits were injured or even died in such a short period of time. Zhou narrowed his eyes slightly. It seemed that even if he used insight defection, there would be heavy casualties in this battle. He would probably have to invest all the faith divine crystals he had saved in this battle. At the same time, when he saw this scene, he immediately ordered all the dimensional cannons to attack the yellow gold tier god attendants with a dark expression. However, as soon as he fired the cannonballs, Zhou, who was in control of the overall situation with the help of the demon abyss spiderweb, immediately knew the movements of these cannonballs. He directly strengthened the spatial strength of the area where the yellow gold tier god attendant was, causing these spatial rift dimensional bullets to fall and disappear without making a splash. When Zell saw this scene, his expression immediately became even uglier. However, even though he knew that it was useless, he did not plan to stop. Instead, he planned to continue using this method to exhaust Zhou's energy. He didn't believe it. The King of the Blazing Sun could always use such methods. When he was unable to use these methods, it would be the end of the King of the Blazing Sun and his kingdom. On the other side, Zhou continued to use the demon abyss spider web calmly to protect his soldiers from the other party's 100,000 spatial rift dimensional cannons. As for his consumption, Zhou looked at the high-tier deity level and even true god-tier supplements in his king's treasure box. Any of these supplements could replenish most of the chaotic sacred power he had consumed. In terms of consumption, he was really not afraid of dragging it out. Seconds ticked by. In the blink of an eye, 4 hours passed. It was already noon the next day. Without the enhancement of the scarlet fog at night, the strength of the fog monster faction, which was already at a disadvantage, decreased greatly again. Coupled with the energy in their bodies, their injuries, and the consumption of items, their combat strength had almost doubled compared to when they had just fought. On the other hand, the soldiers of the Blazing Sun Kingdom, as the day descended, the enemy's strength decreased greatly. They did not need to continue maintaining the black membrane of the Dark Walker, so they immediately felt much more relaxed. Coupled with various external injuries recovery potions, mental recovery potions, combat enhancement potions, and various other potions to increase their combat strength, they poured them into their bodies as if they were free. Their combat strength had almost always maintained their peak state. Seeing them taking potions so crazily that some soldiers even had the time to change into brand new armor and weapons, the fog monster soldiers' already red eyes turned even redder. It was a red color of envy and jealousy. Why are you so rich? The fog monster soldiers were furious. With this comparison, they were simply like militias that had run out of a poor ditch. Pitiful and poor. At this moment, Zell felt that he was about to go crazy. He had been waiting eagerly for the other party to use up all his methods. In the end, when the sky was bright and the sun was already shining on his head, most of his soldiers were almost slaughtered by the other party. The Scarlet God spirits had begun to suffer casualties, but the other party still had the strength to control such a large-scale killing method at the true God tier? Why are you so persistent? Zell was very puzzled. If not for the Supreme Agreement, true God tier definitely could not easily participate in the battle between the lords of the myriad races. He almost suspected that the living being in the spaceship was not the Lord of the Blazing Sun, but a true God tier. At this moment, this sudden piece of news completely made he fall silent. Commander, The spatial rift dimensional bomb has been used up. A legendary tier fog monster general in charge of guarding the ammunition depot flew to his side and said respectfully and fearfully. Chapter 869 Refinement Divine Crystals. After a moment of silence, Zel asked, I remember that there were a total of 50 million spatial rift dimensional bullets in the ammunition warehouse, right? Why did they run out so quickly? Commander-in-Chief, you've been asking us to continuously fire cannonballs. Even though 50 million spatial rift dimensional bombs sounds like a lot, 100,000 spatial rift dimensional bombs can continuously fire cannonballs for 4 hours. This is already the best outcome after we paid attention to maintaining the cannons. Otherwise, 2 hours ago, all the dimensional cannons might have self-destructed because they could not withstand the energy of the cannonballs. The legendary tier fog monster said in fear and grievance. Zel took a deep breath and suppressed his anger to make the legendary tier fog monster general retreat. Then, he suddenly punched the air in front of him, shattering space with a punch and creating a huge hole filled with cracks. It was only after he retracted his fist that the fist hole slowly began to repair itself. Zel hesitated for a moment before extending his right hand. He saw a silver gem lying quietly in his right palm. This gem was called the Refinement Divine Crystals. It was said that after a spatial type true god tier died, a portion of his bones naturally formed a natural treasure. As long as the god spirit consumed this Refinement Divine Crystal, in the following period of time, the god spirit would temporarily possess the strength realm of a true god tier, and a portion of the nomological comprehension of a true god tier. It sounded very tempting, however. In fact, after the god spirits who consumed it consumed all the divine power in their bodies, not only could they not continue to maintain their original strength realm, but their strength would even fall to an even lower level. At the same time, their divine bodies would be severely injured. Under such circumstances, it was almost impossible to recover to their original strength realm. Therefore, even though he had this trump card that could be said to be unsolvable, he had never dared to use it. However, looking at the scene in front of him, he knew that he had no choice but to use it. If he lost this battle, he probably wouldn't even have the chance to use this soul refinement crystal when the time came. Thinking of this, he no longer hesitated as he flew away from his original position and arrived at the highest spot in the sky above the entire battlefield. He took a deep breath and roared at the sky. King of the blazing sun. Under the enhancement of the divine power of a top-notch high-tier deity level, his voice was like a hurricane, turning into a tangible and terrifying transparent sound wave that quickly spread throughout the entire battlefield. There were more than 5 billion soldiers, and more than 120 god spirits on both sides, in addition to the native lord factions who were still trapped on the battlefield, and the lords of the myriad races who were broadcasting the situation on the battlefield. They were attracted by this roar and subconsciously looked at him. Zhou also narrowed his eyes slightly and looked at the commander-in-chief of the allied forces of the fog. What is he doing? King of the blazing sun. Zel raised his right hand, and a silver transparent circular blade gradually appeared in his hand. He stared intently at the galaxy where King of the blazing sun was. Do you dare to fight me? He said in a deep voice. All the living beings and god spirits present looked at him speechlessly. How could this guy be so shameless? A high-tier deity level who had lived for countless years challenged a lord of all races, who had just arrived in the high continent? Where's your pride? It would be strange if the King of the blazing sun agreed to it. Right on the heels of that, they saw the King of the blazing sun appear above the galaxy. He deliberately revealed the aura of a legendary tier advanced grade. He looked at the other party and sneered. Are you sure? Of course. Zel's expression was calm, and he did not feel embarrassed at all. He had lived for tens of thousands of years. He was so thick-skinned that even the supreme defense that formed the city walls of the blazing sun kingdom sighed. Zhou sneered and could not be bothered with him. He wanted to return to the galaxy. When Zel saw this scene, he did not say anything. He only clenched his right hand that was holding the soul refinement crystal. There was a click. A shocking pressure came from his hand and spread to his entire body in the blink of an eye. Boom! A terrifying pressure that belonged to a true god-tier elementary grade existence suddenly erupted from his body. In the blink of an eye, it covered an area of 5,000 kilometers. The sky trembled slightly. A huge agreement condensed from boundless pure white light seemed to appear in the void. It was the legendary Supreme Agreement. In the center of the agreement, one could vaguely see a blue-white eye that was filled with the charm of justice and judgment. It spun around and glanced coldly at Zell, who temporarily had the strength of a true god-tier. Then it closed again and disappeared. Right on the heels of that, the Supreme Agreement also rolled up and disappeared into the void. No one saw this scene, and almost no one noticed it. Only Zhou, who was comprehending the Lord's laws, looked at the sky in confusion. Then, he thought that it was his imagination, and was not too concerned about returning to the galaxy. But at this moment, his expression changed slightly, and he suddenly turned to look in the direction of Zell. In the sky, Zell, who temporarily had the strength of a true god-tier elementary grade, did not attack Zhou immediately. Instead, he rushed towards Suen, who was fighting a high-tier deity-level scarlet god spirit without hesitation, and appeared in front of him, in the blink of an eye. Can you guess how I felt at this moment? Didn't it feel like when you appeared behind me just now? Zell's faint voice sounded with a hint of pleasure. However, in the next second, he was stunned to see this. Suen had actually instantly escaped the suppression of his true god-tier pressure. Immediately after, he slashed at him without any hesitation. It's useless. Even if your talent is astonishing, and you can fight a high-tier deity level when you're a low-tier deity, it's still difficult for you to cross the gap between an ordinary god spirit and a true god tier. Die. If you die in the hands of a true god tier, I won't let you down. Zell ignored Su An's attack on him, and slashed at Su An's head with a round blade. Facing this extremely dangerous scene, a wisp of determination and ruthlessness appeared on Su An's increasingly calm expression. The blood shadow sword in his hand became even faster and stronger. Even if he had to die, he also wanted to slash this hypocritical true god tier. Even if he could only cut off a single strand of his hair, he would not hesitate. But at this moment, boom! A spatial rift suddenly appeared in front of Suen, separating him from Zell. Then, a man with a silver gray divine sword hanging from his waist, and wearing a mysterious gray armor, walked out of the spatial rift calmly, and appeared between the two. His body was surrounded by the phantom of the Nether River, that represented the dead and rebirth. He could even vaguely hear the sound of the Nether River flowing. He raised his right hand, and the ancient slender gray glove in the style of the Nether River gently grabbed the full-strength saber, with killing intent and pleasure. Zell's expression changed immediately. You brat, can't you save me some faith divine crystals? Zhou said to Suen with a headache. Thank you for saving my life, your majesty. Suen smiled and quickly left the battlefield. The following battle was not something he could interfere in. The rest is up to his majesty. The surrounding soldiers, generals, and god spirits seemed to have sensed something and subconsciously made way for the two kings to create a vast area with a diameter of 100,000 square kilometers. They had a feeling that the outcome of the battle between these two would probably determine the true outcome of this battle involving 10 billion life forms and more than 100 god spirits. Chapter 870 Zell vs Zhou. At this moment, a strange scene appeared in the center of the huge battlefield. Zhou and Zell stood opposite each other. The difference between the man and the scarlet god spirit was less than 2 meters. There was actually not a single life form within a radius of 100,000 kilometers. They all hid far away, afraid that the battle between the two of them would affect them. At this moment, Zhou suddenly said, Blazing Sun Kingdom's life forms, listen up. Retreat 100 million kilometers away. Under the influence of decisive mind, all the soldiers, generals, god spirits, and even the fog monster heard Zhou's words. The soldiers of the Sun Kingdom repelled the enemy in front of them without hesitation. Then, they covered each other and retreated back into the galaxy, flying 100 million kilometers away at high speed. When he saw this scene, he also woke up a little from the excitement and fanaticism of obtaining the power of a true god tier. You've also retreated 100 million kilometers away. He also spoke. He had almost forgotten that he had suddenly obtained the power of a true god tier. If he did not control it well, it would be very easy for him to injure his allies. After hearing their commander's words, the fog monster soldiers and the scarlet god spirits hesitated for a moment before rushing 100 million kilometers away. However, they did not have the galaxy. Even though they also had more than 10 high-tier deity-level scarlet boats, their speed was far inferior to the galaxy that the Master God tier had personally built. It would probably take some time for the soldiers and god spirits of both sides to continue fighting. After seeing his soldiers and god spirits leave, Aklzel snorted coldly and pulled back his high-tier deity-level advanced grade divine artifact, the world-shattering blade, to distance himself from Zhou. He looked at Zhou and sensed his aura that was infinitely close to that of a true god tier. He narrowed his eyes slightly before sneering. In the end, he was only infinitely close to becoming a true god tier. Facing a scarlet god spirit that had temporarily reached the level of an elementary grade true god tier, there could only be one outcome for him, and that was death. The way he looked at Zhou was still as if he was looking at a dead person. Zhou didn't mind. Instead, he drew his sword of new dimension creation, pulled out the blade, and stroked the silver-gray sword with his fingers. As it was still in the state of concealing its divine artifact, Aklzel did not notice that Zhou was holding a true god-tier divine artifacts. Pretentious, he sneered in his heart. At the same time, he began to familiarize himself with the powerful true god-tier power he had just obtained. As he also walked the path of a god spirit with the law of space, he accepted this kind of power abnormally smoothly. In fact, he felt that his comprehension of the law of space was advancing by leaps and bounds at this moment. He had the feeling that even if his strength regressed or even fell, he would also understand how to walk the path of a future true god tier. If I can treat my injuries from using the soul refinement crystal in the future, I might be able to become a true god tier scarlet and reach the level of those lords. Aklzel was excited and expectant. At this moment, he saw Zhou suddenly raise the divine sword in his hand and point the tip at him. What are you doing? Our soldiers haven't retreated 100 million kilometers away. If we fight now, the aftershock of my battle will not only affect my soldiers, but also your soldiers. Aklzel made up his mind. My soldiers have already retreated 100 million kilometers away. Only your soldiers are not 100 million kilometers away, Zhou said calmly. But Aklzel was about to say something when he saw Zhou swing his sword. The terrifying aura emitted by the sword made Aklzel's expression change drastically. True god tier divine artifacts? You can actually use true god tier divine artifacts? Aklzel exclaimed. This fellow had clearly only temporarily raised his strength to the high tier deity level advanced grade. This was already shocking enough. He didn't expect this guy to be able to use true god-tier divine artifacts at this stage. Aklzel was stunned. There was no such thing recorded in the information they had scouted previously. There was no time for him to think too much. At this moment, Zhou's performance in controlling the true god-tier divine artifacts undoubtedly proved that he already had the ability to officially fight him. He had to treat him as an opponent of the same level. Otherwise, he would definitely be the one to suffer in the end. No wonder you dared to fight me alone. So you're still hiding such a method. The Lord of all races has underestimated you. No, it should be that the myriad races civilization, and even our Scarlet Fog faction, have underestimated you, a human lord. A shocking killing intent erupted in Aklzel's eyes. At this moment, Zhou's threat was thousands of times greater than Suan's. If Suan grew up, he might become a general under the Supreme Will in the future. Then, with King of the Blazing Sun's current performance, he could actually be considered a reserve general. To put it simply, the former was only a genius, while the latter was already a true expert after the genius had grown up. You have the nerve to tell me this? Zhou sneered and slashed at Zel's head. Zel immediately raised the world-shattering saber to block it. Boom! The two weapons collided. The sound of swords colliding suddenly sounded in the world, and the sound spread to a radius of 1,000,000 kilometers. In this range, all the living beings who had yet to escape heard the sound of the weapon colliding, and could not help but be shocked. The ground within a radius of 4,000 to 5,000 kilometers of the two divine artifacts seemed to have been bombarded by super weapons. It was as if an earthquake had passed. The forest was completely destroyed, the mountains collapsed, the lakes dried up, and the earthquake cracked. In this area, it was actually completely destroyed with a single strike. At the same time, the moment Zhou and Zel exchanged blows, Zel's world-shattering saber immediately let out a painful cry. An extremely minute crack even appeared on the blade. The moment Zhou and Zel exchanged blows, Zel's world-shattering saber immediately let out a painful cry. An extremely minute crack even appeared on the blade. The difference between the two divine artifacts was obvious. Zel's expression changed slightly, and he immediately retreated 40,000 to 50,000 kilometers. Then, he looked at the small crack on the surface of the world-shattering saber in his hand with a pained expression. This high-tier deity-level advanced-grade divine artifact, the world-shattering saber, could be said to be top-notch even among many top-notch high-tier deity-level advanced-grade divine artifacts. It was even said that it was forged from the fragments of a true god-tier weapon, so its sturdiness was needless to say. He did not expect that it would actually crack with a single touch when fighting against true god-tier divine artifacts. He looked at the King of the Blazing Sun with a slightly solemn expression. At the same time, he was thinking of a countermeasure. King of the Blazing Sun uses the body of a high-tier deity-level advanced-grade god spirit to control true god-tier divine artifacts. This process will definitely consume a lot of energy. It definitely won't last long. This period of time is when he's at his strongest. I can't fight him head-on. I'll swim around and consume he first. When his divine power is exhausted, I'll be able to control him at will. Zel made up his mind, and immediately began to use the divine artifact law attached to the world-shattering saber, and the spatial law technique he had mastered to attack. The law of space was not only powerful in terms of attack, but also extremely powerful in terms of the book of concealment and teleportation technique. Among the many nomological laws, only a few nomological laws could surpass the spatial nomological laws in terms of concealment and teleportation. He teleported in front of Zhou and slashed at him with the world-shattering saber in his hand, bringing with it a powerful and terrifying spatial fluctuation. Zhou swung his sword back fearlessly. Halfway through, he saw Zel disappear along with the monster and the saber. He seemed to sense something and suddenly turned his head. He saw Zel appear in the air thousands of kilometers away. He began to brew a spatial law technique and slashed again. In the blink of an eye, he appeared behind Zhou, wanting to launch a surprise attack from behind. Zhou suddenly turned around and slashed out. 10,000 swords turned into immortals, raising a smoke wave of 50,000 kilometers. Chapter 871 Death in a Dream. Zel wanted to use the same trick again, but he didn't expect the sword aura to cover such a radiance. Furthermore, it seemed to have some predictions. Even though he had already used spatial teleportation to dodge in advance, he had already attacked the place where he would appear after teleporting in advance, and directly destroyed the right side of his body. He did not hesitate to consume his divine power to construct his obliterated right half of his body. Then, he escaped into space again and disappeared. He would wait for an opportunity to launch another sneak attack. After fighting for more than 2 hours, even though Zhou was not injured with the Eternal Fallen Stick's divine armor, Zel could sense that the strange divine power in the King of the Blazing Sun's body had clearly decreased significantly. It was only about 20 to 30% left, and the might of the sword energy it emitted had decreased by 40 to 50%. It looks like the xenogenic divine power in your body is about to be exhausted. Zel saw that his plan had worked. He calmly walked out of the small spatial world he had temporarily created and looked at Zhou maliciously. He was a top-notch high-tier deity-level Scarlet God Spirit, a junior valued by many lords of Scarlet. After using his trump card that would cause endless trouble in the future, he was actually chased by a legendary tier lord of the human race? Thinking of this, he was filled with anger. Fortunately, the other party's apocalypse was approaching. Otherwise, he really didn't know how to return to meet those adults. So this is the way you came up with to defeat me? Zhou shook his head. A dignified high-tier deity level actually thought of such a clumsy and embarrassing method. It's not important. A sinister smile appeared on Zell's lips. It's enough to kill you. As soon as he finished speaking, he once again hid in space and activated this assassination mode on Zhou. More than an hour later, Zell calculated that there should be very few people of foreign races in Zhou's body who could use true god-tier artifacts. Having reached this conclusion, he teleported in front of Zhou without any hesitation and slashed at Zhou's temple with all his might. Swoosh! The next second, Zhou's head was directly cut in half. Then the aura on his body gradually returned to silence. The sword of new dimension creation in his hand and the eternal fallen stick's divine armor on him also automatically left Zhou's corpse and floated in the air because he had lost its owner. Zell's eyes lit up when he saw this. He immediately reached out and grabbed the two divine artifacts. He carefully held them in his hands and observed them carefully. Zell's eyes lit up when he saw this. He immediately reached out and grabbed the two divine artifacts. He carefully held them in his hands and observed them carefully. The true God-tier intermediate-grade divine artifact, Sword of New Dimension Creation. There are actually two true God-tier divine artifacts. Zell's eyes turned red. He never expected the King of the Blazing Sun to be so rich. However, on second thought, now that the two true God-tier divine artifacts were in his hands and the wealth had been transferred to him, he immediately became extremely excited. A true God-tier is possible. A true God-tier is possible. He danced excitedly like a lunatic. Then, he suddenly came back to his senses and hurriedly waved his right hand. He moved Zhou's corpse in front of him and seriously examined it. After confirming that it was really the corpse of the human king of the blazing sun, a smile appeared on his face. Even though I suffered heavy losses in this battle, and even lost my future potential because of the soul refinement crystal, it's fine as long as we can take down King of the Blazing Sun. Send it back to His Majesty, and let His Majesty offer it to the Lord of the Forbidden Source. When they are satisfied, they will definitely reward me with a reward for recovering from my injuries, or even going further. A smile appeared on Zell's face, as if he could imagine himself receiving rewards in the future, and becoming a true God tier, or even a master God tier. Then he stopped thinking about it. First, he led the Scarlet Lord's alliance to defeat the army of the Blazing Sun Kingdom. Then, he swept through the Blazing Sun Kingdom, and obtained many treasures that he couldn't remember clearly. He was very greedy and chose to put all these treasures into his waist bag. He only left a few other treasures for the other Scarlet Lord factions, who participated in this battle. Then, he rushed back to the Empire with the King of the Blazing Sun's corpse, and met His Majesty. He also offered the King of the Blazing Sun's corpse to the King of the Archmage Scarlet Empire. As expected, the king praised he greatly and rewarded him with many treasures. However, he could not do anything about the injuries he had caused after using the soul refining crystal. Therefore, His Majesty was very generous and decided to bring he to the master of the Archmage Scarlet Empire, one of the many lords under the Crimson Overlord, the Forbidden Source, to beg this terrifying existence to treat his injuries. Zell was very happy and excited, but he was also a little puzzled. His Majesty had never bought any trusted aides to meet the Lord of the Forbidden Source. Even though he had killed the King of the Blazing Sun and made a great contribution, would he really let His Majesty bring him to meet that Lord? He vaguely felt that something was amiss. However, he did not know what was wrong. Therefore, he arrived in front of the palace of the Forbidden Source in a daze. Then, he was shocked and pleasantly surprised. Because he discovered that the legendary forbidden source was indeed as great and mysterious as he had imagined. He stood there like the source of all taboo knowledge. He was an omnipotent and omniscient taboo true lord. "Greetings, Lord Forbidden Source," Zel said respectfully. "I already know why you're here," the Forbidden Source said. Every word that landed in his heart seemed to awaken countless taboo knowledge in his heart, causing he to lower his head even more. "I already know about the matter regarding King of the Blazing Sun. You should take the credit. In order to reward you and treat your injuries, I've decided to transform you into a taboo divine body. You don't need your divine body and soul anymore. Give up your life in front of me. I will give you a new life. When the time comes with your taboo divine body, it's not difficult for you to become a master god tier, let alone become a true god tier." The Forbidden Source's voice rumbled. Zel was a little hesitant when he heard the first half of the sentence. But when he heard that this taboo divine body could become a true god tier, or even a master god tier, his eyes immediately lit up. He could even feel that His Majesty was looking at him enviously, and even respectfully. "Your Holiness, is what you said true?" He could not help but ask. "Why would I lie to you?" the Forbidden Source said unhappily. Then it urged, "If you want to give up your life, quickly give up. Otherwise, if you delay me a little longer, I might change my mind." Okay. Zel only hesitated for a second before his eyes became firm. He had to become a true god tier, or even a master god tier. For this reason, he was willing to take any risk. He no longer hesitated. He immediately took out his world-shattering saber and shattered his divine spark. Before he died, he, who was filled with anticipation, suddenly saw the appearance of the Forbidden Source. At some point in time, it had quietly transformed into Zhou. His eyes turned blank. Before he died, he heard the last sentence of surprise. This nine-headed nightmare demon god's dream creation and weaving nightmare realm technique are actually so effective at the true god tier level. I've underestimated my inheritance. Zel did not say anything and gradually lost his breath. Chapter 872 Untitled 1. The battlefield fell silent when Zel committed suicide. Everyone who saw this scene, including the soldiers and god spirits of the Blazing Sun Kingdom, the coalition army of the Fog Monster faction, or the Lord factions of the myriad races who were hiding in the surroundings and quietly watching the live broadcast, were all dumbfounded. He was still fighting well just now. Why did he suddenly kill himself? Could it be? They looked at the calm king of the Blazing Sun, and suddenly felt a chill and shock. Could it be that this king of the Blazing Sun, whose name shook the myriad races, actually grasped such silent, strange, and unfathomable methods? Even a true god-tier enemy could not escape death? They looked at the king of the Blazing Sun Kingdom, who was wearing the Emperor Dragon robe, and had a handsome face and a tall figure. He had the aura of a regal, and looked down on everyone. There was only one thought in the minds of the billions of life forms. Wasn't this really an expert from a top civilization of the myriad races, who personally came to participate in the Lord of all races? This was clearly cheating. At the same time, when he saw Zel commit suicide in front of Zhou, the Yellow Emperor, Patriarch Lu, and Bai He, who were watching the battle in secret, were also stunned. After a long time, Bai He spoke with difficulty. "Am I seeing things? Zhou, the sixth counselor actually killed an enemy at the true god tier? Even if this true god tier was temporarily upgraded by external objects, he still has genuine true god tier combat strength. At most, he's slightly weaker than ordinary true god tier elementary grade, and the duration is slightly shorter." At this point, he looked at Patriarch Lu. Patriarch Lu and him were true god tier elementary grade experts. Zhou could kill Zel easily. Didn't that mean that his strength was already comparable to them, or even surpassed them? "The sixth counselor is on our side." Patriarch Lu was silent for a moment, before saying with a complicated and emotional tone, "The most unbelievable thing is that he hasn't even become a god spirit." Bai He added. As soon as these words were spoken, the three true god tier god spirits fell silent. A human who had yet to become a god could actually surpass the low-tier deity level mid-tier deity level, and high-tier deity level, and directly kill in existence at the true god tier level. Honestly, they had lived for a long time, and had seen many human geniuses, and geniuses of the people of foreign races, who could fight above their level. However, they had never seen a battle that surpassed 3 levels like Zhou. It was unheard of. Even Regal Pengu, who had grasped a suspected true god-tier artifact from the beginning of his rise, did not seem to have such shocking results. But he suddenly looked a little dazed and emotional. I remember. When the 6th counselor first came to the High Continent, he was weak. When he fought other lords, even if he was very strong, he would not easily attack. Instead, he handed everything to his original dragon to conquer powerful enemies. This situation lasted for a long time. It was only recently that Zhou gradually began to show his true strength. When it's time to lay low and develop my strength, even if I have sharp blades, I can hide my strength, hide myself, and accumulate strength. However, when it comes to the time where there's no need to hide yourself and can bloom with light, even the myriad races of the various worlds have to become spectators and look up to the light of the 6th counselor, King of the Blazing Sun. The 3 of them looked at each other and sighed in unison. What a good King of the Blazing Sun. It's so hard to hide it from us. The Yellow Emperor chuckled as he stroked his beard with shining eyes. But you hid it well. If he doesn't hide it like this, he will probably be like those geniuses of our human race in the past. He will die under internal strife, or the assassination of the people of foreign races before he even grows up. The Yellow Emperor was extremely satisfied. He had potential but knew when to advance and when to retreat. He was willing to hide his strength and bide his time. It had been a long time since he had seen such a human genius. No wonder Zhou could achieve such achievements today. Even though Zhou's secret technique that can suddenly increase his strength by 3 realms looks like it can only be maintained for a short period of time, his combat strength is not bad. He can be considered a true god-tier existence. Patriarch Lu said with a very serious expression, I suggest that from today onwards, give the King of the Blazing Sun the high-level status and treatment equivalent to us true god-tier existences. I agree. But he thought for a moment before agreeing readily. Zhou's combat strength performance just now made him feel that he was not inferior to him at all. Even though it had only been a short period of time, he was also willing for him to come to the height where he was. I agree too. The Yellow Emperor smiled and nodded. Then he said, there's no need to worry about the other higher-ups of the human race. When we go back and show them the recording of Zhou's battle just now, they will naturally be eager to raise Zhou to the same level as us. Bai He and Patriarch Lu nodded with a smile. What a joke! If they did not spend money and resources on such a super expert of the human race, should they be waiting for the other races to poach him before sighing and regretting? Even though the upper echelons of the human race yearned for the power, status, and benefits of the true god tier, they were definitely not fools. Facing Zhou, who had better investment prospects, the upper echelons of the human race knew what to choose. At this moment, Bai He suddenly thought of something, and looked at Zhou with a solemn expression. Even though this battle allowed Zhou to completely shine, and shock the lords of all races, and the billions of races in the myriad worlds. Chapter 873 Untitled 2. But fortune and misfortune depend on each other. The light released will definitely attract the jealousy and hostility of billions of races in the myriad worlds, especially those with high bloodlines. The light released will definitely attract the jealousy and hostility of billions of races in the myriad worlds, especially those with high bloodlines. If they finds out that a lord of all races that far exceeds their expectations has appeared, and that he's a human from a low-middle race, even with the supreme agreement stopping them, I'm afraid they will join forces to deal with Zhou. The Yellow Emperor and Patriarch Lu also looked solemn. What I'm most worried about is that based on Zhou's performance, he probably already has the potential to compete for the Lord of all races. Those high-level bloodline races that have always been high and mighty will definitely not allow such a Lord of all races to continue existing in the Lord of all races competition. They will definitely target Zhou with all their might next. They might even put down their conflict and join forces to target Zhou, or even us humans. I'm afraid a new war has begun. Moreover, it's a war specially targeted at Zhou and us humans. This will be an unprecedented calamity for our human race. The expressions of the three true god tiers of the human race suddenly turned from incomparable surprise and excitement to incomparably solemn and serious. King of 10,000 Kings event hint. You have led your territory soldiers to kill Legion Commander Oculus Zell, high-tier deity level advanced grade, of the Forbidden Scarlet Legion from the elementary Scarlet Empire. You have made outstanding contributions to this King of 10,000 Kings event. You are rewarded with 1 bottle of potential advancement potion, high-tier deity level advanced grade, 1 book of the God Spirit, high-tier deity level advanced grade, 100 divine crystals, high-tier deity level advanced blueprint. King of 10,000 Kings event hint. You have obtained the achievement Scarlet Beheader, high-tier deity level. Scarlet Beheader, high-tier deity level 300 million universal general faction points. Zhou glanced at the notification, and a faint smile appeared on his lips. When he saw Oculus Zell, he had vaguely sensed that he was also one of the targets of the Eye of the Heavens anger. Therefore, he was not surprised by the 2 lines of notifications in front of him. However, what surprised him was that the universal general faction points given were more than 200 million. One Oculus Zell was actually comparable to the faction points awarded by 2 top-notch faction missions at the Empire level. Zhou thought for a moment and had a guess. Either this guy led 12 Empire-level Scarlet Legions, and more than 200 Kingdom-level Scarlet Legions, making his status too high, so he was rewarded with so many faction points. Either this guy had extraordinary potential, and could reach the true God tier, or even the Master God tier level, which was why he was rewarded with so many faction points. Zhou could tell too. The Eye of the Heavens anger did not choose all the Scarlet God spirits. Instead, it specially chose those Scarlet God spirits with extraordinary potential to kill. 4 ordinary Scarlet God spirits. Even if the other party was a high-tier deity-level Scarlet God spirit, the Eye of the Heavens anger might not necessarily choose the other party as its target. Zhou thought for a moment, and felt that Oculus Zell should have both. He did not think too much about it. He first removed the King state, and allowed himself to return to the strength realm of a legendary tier advanced grade. Even so, many Scarlet powerhouses and Scarlet God spirits looked at the legendary advanced grade Zhou in the middle of the battlefield, their hearts filled with fear. No one dared to rush forward at this moment to test if the King of the Blazing Sun could really not maintain his previous state. Who knows? Perhaps he would have died if he tried. At the same time, the sudden decrease in strength made Zhou feel a sense of emptiness in his heart. Fortunately, he was used to it, so he didn't pay much attention to it. He raised his hand and waved, and he saw Oculus Zell's corpse fly in front of him. He looked at the corpse and increasingly felt the profundity of the dream law. In the future, this dream entering technique will also be my first trump card. Zhou smiled. This method of fighting the enemy was much easier than fighting with real swords and spears. It was all because the other party had committed suicide. However, it was not without flaws. Even if he encountered an existence with strong spiritual will, the dream law would probably not hurt the other party at all. It might even backfire on him. Zhou didn't mind, and looked at this guy's spoils of war. Item name, Sky King, Oculus Zell's corpse item level, high-tier deity level advanced grade. Item effect, contains unextracted loots. Item description, beginner level Scarlet Empire, great general of the Archmage Scarlet Empire. His potential is as high as a true God tier advanced grade. He is a junior who is valued and supported by many Scarlet True Gods. Later on, during the expedition to the Blazing Sun Kingdom, he took on the position of the Commander-in-Chief of the Scarlet Alliance Army. However, in the end, he was no match for King of the Blazing Sun. King of the Blazing Sun used a true God-level secret technique, and lured him to his death in his dream. Loot drop rate, 200 high-tier deity level advanced grade divine crystals, drop rate 100%. 2 million origin crystal fragments. 1 high-tier deity level advanced grade hero skill. Teleportation field, drop rate 5%. 1 high-tier deity level advanced grade hero skill. Airlock technique, drop rate 5%. 1 high-tier deity level advanced grade hero skill. Turbulent air sword, drop rate 5%. 1 piece of high-tier deity level advanced grade divine artifact. World-shattering blade, drop rate 1%. 1 piece of high-tier deity level advanced grade divine artifact. Heaven-defying armor, drop rate 1%. 1 piece of high-tier deity level intermediate grade divine artifact. Chaotic sky boots, drop rate 20%. 1 piece of high-tier deity level elementary grade divine artifact. God-suppressing tower, drop rate 5%. Mid-tier deity level advanced grade equipment. Small world, drop rate 5%. 1 high-tier deity level advanced grade spatial teleportation divine spark fragment, drop rate 5%. 1 high-tier deity level advanced grade spatial lockdown divine spark fragment, drop rate 5%. 1 high-tier deity level advanced grade spatial cut divine spark fragment, drop rate 5%. 1 high-tier deity level advanced grade hero inheritance, drop rate 3%. 1 high-tier deity level book of the God Spirit, drop rate 0.1%. 7 black iron tier lord talent crystal fragments, drop rate 0%. Do you want to retrieve the loot? Do you want to use the race divine artifact, Lucky Star, to retrieve the special loots? Yes, Zhou immediately said. This existence that was valued by the eye of the heavens' anger was qualified to let him use the power of the Lucky Star. Lord Talent notification. Your loots have been enhanced by the King of Loots, Perfect Loots. Grade +1. Title hint. Your loots have been affected by the title of the strongest lord. The number of loots has increased by 150%. Lord Talent notification. You have obtained perfect loots, 500 divine crystals, true god tier advanced grade. 5 million origin crystal fragments, 3 hero skill books, 1 thought univies, true god tier advanced grade. 3 hero skill books, world lock, true god tier advanced grade. 3 hero skill books, 10,000 tide heaven shattering slash, true god tier advanced grade. 3 divine artifacts, universe destroying blade, true god tier advanced grade. 3 divine artifacts, heaven and earth concentric armor, true god tier advanced grade. 3 divine artifacts, world stepping boots, true god tier intermediate grade. 3 divine artifacts, sacred heart orb, true god tier elementary grade. 3 divine artifacts, middle world spheres, high tier deity level intermediate grade. 3 true god tier advanced grade infinite teleportation divine sparks. 3 true god tier advanced grade spatial seal divine sparks. 3 true god tier advanced grade dimensional slash divine sparks. 1 hero inheritance, true god tier advanced grade. 1 true god tier advanced grade book of the God Spirit. 17 green bronze tier lord talent crystal fragments. Lucky Star hint. You have obtained a special loots, potential advancement potion, Master God elementary grade. Zhou looked at the loots and smiled. As expected of the commander-in-chief of the Scarlet Army's allied army, he actually had a total of 4 high-tier deity-level divine artifacts on him. With the enhancement of his King of Loots, it directly provided him with a total of 12 true god-tier divine artifacts. If not for the fact that he had the identity of a lord of the myriad races to protect him, and the protection of the Supreme Agreement, even if he had the combat power of a Master God tier, there would probably be main God-level powerhouses who would dare to snatch it, let alone him having the combat power of a true God tier. Many Master God tiers did not even have true God tier divine artifacts. They could only make do with top-notch high-tier deity-level divine artifacts. As for the special loots that the Lucky Star had obtained for him, he was a little surprised. It was actually something like the potential advancement potion. Moreover, it was a Master God tier elementary grade potential advancement potion. It would probably be enough to make many true God tier go crazy. This is good stuff. Zhou looked at the Master God tier elementary grade potential advancement potion in his king's treasure box and nodded in satisfaction. With just this, he could create a subordinate with the potential of a Master God tier for his territory. His future was promising. Zhou thought for a moment, and threw it into the military merit system. He would use it to encourage the soldiers and god spirits. With such a potion, he believed that his soldiers would definitely go crazy in order to obtain military merits in the future. Then he began to check the other loots. Chapter 870, For the Advancement Path of a God Spirit. There was naturally no need to mention true God tier advanced grade God spirits, origin crystals, and Lord Talent crystal fragments. Zhou looked at the hero skill. Hero skill. One Thought Universe. Level. True God tier advanced grade. Skill effect. A hero who has mastered the hero skill. One Thought Universe can obtain the ability to perform spatial teleportation in the entire world by analyzing the spatial laws of the current world. The hero can teleport the entire army under his command to any location in the current world with a thought after activating this hero skill. Hint 1. Hero skill. One Thought Universe's teleportation range and the number of life forms it carries depends on the extent of the hero's control over this hero skill and the hero's own strength. The higher the level of control a hero has over a hero's skill, the deeper the analysis of the spatial laws of the current world. The stronger they are, the more they can teleport to a further place and carry more life forms. On the other hand, the closer they teleport, the fewer lives they can bring. Hint 2. This hero skill is essentially a half-growth skill. The upper limit of growth is True God tier advanced grade. Any hero with a hero's fate level True God tier and above can learn it. A top-notch hero skill. Zhou's eyes lit up when he saw the effect of this hero skill. Teleportation itself was very practical. Not to mention the two top-grade effects of teleportation in the world and group teleportation. With the enhancement of these two effects, the effect of this law skill, One Thought Universe could be said to be at a strategic level. Billions of soldiers could be teleported anywhere with a thought. One could think of many great uses just by imagining it. By Yen Wu Xian Feng Luo Sheng. Currently, I have many heroes under me who have the True God tier hero fate level. They can all learn this hero skill. Zhou nodded in satisfaction. After obtaining the True God tier level secret manual of the hero inheritance, he naturally would not be stingy. Instead, he would directly distribute them to his subordinates, allowing their strength and potential to grow fully. A hero skill of this level would have been difficult to choose heroes with sufficient qualification to learn it if it was any other Lord faction, even if it was an Empire-level Lord faction. However, there were many qualified to learn in their Blazing Sun Kingdom. Zhou put it away and looked at the next two hero skills. Hero skill, World Lock. Level. True God tier advanced grade, skill effect. Heroes who have mastered the hero skill, World Lock can perform a super large-scale spatial seal. It could even seal the entire world, preventing any life form in this world from escaping the range of the world at its best, and can even freeze the space of the entire world. Prompt. This hero skill is essentially a half-growth skill. The upper limit of growth is the True God tier advanced grade. Any hero with the True God tier and above fate level can learn it. Hero skill. 10,000 Tide Heaven Shattering / level. True God tier advanced grade. Skill effect. A hero who has mastered the hero skill, 10,000 Tide Heaven Shattering / can trigger endless spatial tides in the depths of the interlayer of space and transform them into a terrifying tide of energy that can destroy the enemy and their faction. Prompt. This hero skill is essentially a half-growth skill. The upper limit of growth is the True God tier advanced grade. Any hero with the True God tier and above fate level can learn it. Zhou looked at the two lords thoughtfully. Of these two hero skills, one was the World Lock with the main spatial seal ability, and the other was the 10,000 Tide Heaven Shattering / with the main strangulation ability. The first hero skill, One Thought Universe, was focused on teleportation. Teleportation, sealing, strangulation. These are the three great nomological paths of the law of space. If I can completely grasp the three great principles of the law of space and fuse them into a complete world of the law of space, I can become a space master god tier god spirit. Good God. These 9 hero skills directly provide me with 3 future paths towards Space Master God tier God spirits. Zhou muttered. From the perspective of the God spirits who purely walked the path of the laws, legendary tier advanced grade was the easiest to break through to low-tier deity level elementary grade. He only needed to accumulate enough promotion energy and comprehend a complete low-tier deity level elementary grade law skill. Zhou walked the path of a Lord's law. The situation was special, so he only needed to comprehend an extraordinary tier Lord's law skill to advance to a God spirit. As for the mid-tier deity level and high-tier deity level, there were not many changes. It was just to continue accumulating promotion energy and use the law skill as the foundation to increase his law comprehension of the law path, where the law skill was. If he accumulated enough nomological comprehension of promotion energy and law skills, he could naturally continuously increase his nomological realm. The situation changed when a high-tier deity level advanced grade advanced to the true God tier elementary grade. When it came to the big leaps of promotional energy, high-tier deity level advanced grade God spirits' comprehension of their own nomological path needed to be raised to an extremely high level. Specific manifestations at this level are: God spirits' law comprehension gradually formed a system of its own and formed a law seed. The law seed would be rooted in his divine spark and branded in his divine power, allowing every divine power to have its own law mark. At this moment, not only would the divine spark jump to the true God tier divine spark, it would also use this divine spark as the foundation to make the true God tier divine spark become the seed of the middle world. It could also be said to be the origin of one middle world. At this time, if a true God tier God spirit wanted to continue improving, he would need to use this world's origin as the foundation and focus on improving his law comprehension on this path of laws. They would use the law comprehension to water the world's origin and let the world's origin grow continuously until it formed a complete middle world. At this moment, he would have perfected the true God tier realm and would be promoted to a Master God tier with this plan. There were several conditions to advance to the Master God tier, and one of the most important too was to comprehend a complete law. Any Master God tier would have comprehended at least one complete law. That was why Zhou felt that these 3 9 hero skills would directly give him 3 future Master God tiers of the law of space. Zhou solemnly put away the 9 sets of law skills. He was prepared to see who was prepared to walk the path of the law of space and give the other party these 3 hero skills. Even though a Master God tier subordinate was very, very far away from him, Zhou was not in a hurry. He could slowly nurture them. As for himself, he naturally did not need it. With a ruling Lord Law skill like the king around, if his subordinates knew how to use it, it meant that he could use it too. Learn it himself? No need at all. Then he looked at the divine artifacts that dropped. It had to be said that Akil's Zell was indeed worth being targeted by the eye of the heaven's anger. This was because there were a total of 8 divine artifacts that he had dropped before the loots were enhanced by the king of loots. Among them were 4 high-tier deity-level divine artifacts, 1 mid-tier deity-level divine artifact, and 3 low-tier deity divine artifacts. This was the first time Zhou had seen such a rich foundation. Chapter 875 12 True God Tier Divine Artifacts. The universe-destroying blade, after being enhanced by the title of the King of Loots and the Strongest Lord, these 8 divine artifacts directly tripled and became 24 divine artifacts. Among them, Zhou only took a glance at the 12 high-tier deity level and low-tier deity level divine artifacts before throwing them into his king's treasure box. Then he focused on the 12 true God tier divine artifacts. The first thing he saw was a large saber. It was more than 2 meters long, and its entire body was dark. The blade was rugged and looked cold, mysterious, and domineering. It was as if he could see a complete world being destroyed under its blade. Divine Artifact Name: Universe Destroying Blade. Divine Artifact Grade: True God Tier Advanced Grade. Divine Artifact Law 1. The Universe Destroying Blade was originally just an ordinary wooden blade. After an unknown expert borrowed it to destroy a middle world, it absorbed the power of destruction born from an entire middle world and advanced to a top-notch true God-tier advanced grade divine artifact. It has the power to destroy all living beings. Divine Artifact Law 2. Universe Fall. Activate the source of destruction of the universe destroying blade and slash at any existence that can destroy the world. It can kill existences below true God-tier advanced grade. It can even destroy a complete middle world. After using it, one needs to absorb the destructive power of the destroyed life form, or thing, to recover the full power of the universe-destroying blade. It can even advance to a higher level and increase the power of the universe-destroying blade. Divine Artifact Law 3. Extermination Origin. The universe-destroying blade contains the complete origin of the extermination law. The owner of the divine artifact can enter it with his soul and comprehend the mysteries of the extermination law at any time. Prompt: it can be bound to the soul. Zhou clicked his tongue. The predecessor of this top-notch true God-tier divine artifacts was actually an ordinary wooden saber? Just because it was used by an unknown expert to destroy a middle world, it absorbed all the foundations of the middle world, and actually became a top-notch true God-tier divine artifacts. Just thinking about it made him feel ridiculous. This was equivalent to an ordinary transmigrator discovering that he had actually become the Jade Emperor himself after transmigrating. He picked up this true God-tier divine artifacts. First, he made it recognize his soul as its master. Then he activated the king again. When he reached a realm infinitely close to the high-tier deity level advanced grade, he would then inject the chaotic sacred power into it. The surface of the universe-destroying blade gradually emitted a gray light. It looked ordinary, but Zhou suddenly felt fear in his heart. This is the power of the law of extermination. All living beings and things can be destroyed. Zhou pondered. This law of extermination should be a branch of the law of destruction. It specialized in destroying matter and killing life forms. Perhaps the overall extermination attribute was not as strong as the complete law of destruction. However, in terms of destroying matter and killing life forms, it was definitely not inferior to the law of destruction. You can be my weapon in the future. Zhou chuckled and shrunk it to the size of a palm before hanging it on his waist. As such, he had the incomplete sword of Xian Yuan, the regal sage Dao sword, the dimensional blade, and the universe-destroying blade at his waist. He could use whichever one he wanted. There was no hurry to retire the dimensional blade. Even though it was a true God-tier intermediate grade divine artifact, and was inferior to the universe-destroying blade, Zhou himself had an extremely high sword Dao realm. In terms of combat strength, his combat strength, when using the dimensional blade, was not inferior to the universe-destroying blade. He would keep it by his side as a spare. The second true God-tier advanced grade divine artifact, the Heaven and Earth Concentric Armor, was an even stronger defensive equipment than the Eternal Fallen Styx divine armor. However, Zhou's strength was too low, and he could not control too many true God-tier divine artifacts. He had to make a choice. Otherwise, his chaotic sacred power would not be enough. Therefore, he could only store it in his king's treasure vault first, and change with the Eternal Fallen Styx divine armor when his strength was enough in the future. The third true God-tier intermediate grade divine artifact, World Stepping Boots, was a divine artifact that could both attack and defend. However, Zhou temporarily kept it in his king's treasure vault for the same reason. The fourth divine artifact, the Sacred Heart Orb, was a true God-tier divine artifacts that protected the soul. Zhou had already cultivated will like light, and had no need for such divine artifacts, so he directly placed them in his treasure vault as well. Then, Zhou looked at the divine spark fragments of the three true God-tier advanced grades: Infinite Teleportation, Spatial Seal, Dimensional Slash. The first two were the true God-tier versions of Spatial Teleportation and Spatial Strangulation. As for the Dimensional Slash, it was the strongest single-target attack law skill of the space law. It was said that with a single strike, the universe would be destroyed. Literally. As for the final true God-tier advanced grade, Hero Inheritance Secret Manual, and Book of the God Spirit, they were the legacy of a hero and true God called True God-tier Universe. Zhou stored them away, so that he could use them to reward his subordinates in the future. However, when he saw the Book of the God Spirit, Zhou recalled the Book of the God Spirit that he had obtained from the Master God Tier Advanced Grade, Juggernaut of the Abyss. His expression was slightly gloomy. After the Abyss will defeated Deep Abyss bloodline will. It sent a message to him. He said that as long as he walked the path of the Juggernaut of the Abyss, he would stand up and support him when the lords of all races competed for the Lord of all races in the future. The Abyss would also spend resources to nurture him, so that Zhou could successfully advance to the true God tier, or even the Master God tier realm in the future. He even said that as long as what he did satisfied him, he could give the position of the Abyss will to Zhou in the future. After that, the other party left without listening to Zhou's reply. Perhaps the Abyss will felt that it was impossible for Zhou, a lord of the human race, to reject the Juggernaut of the Abyss God Spirit, who was at Master God Tier Advanced Grade. However, Zhou actually rejected it in his heart. The Juggernaut of the Abyss sounded nice, but even if he grew to the Master God Tier Advanced Grade, he would still be weaker than the Supreme God Realm, and would also be controlled by the Abyss will. If he decided to take this path, he would definitely be restrained by the Abyss will in the future. The Juggernaut of the Abyss God Spirit path originated from the Abyss, and from the Abyss will after all. It was simply too easy for him to set up some back doors that he could control on this God Spirit path. He stopped thinking about it. Zhou looked at the surrounding battlefield. At this moment, even though Zell was dead and the morale of the allied forces of the Scarlet Army had plummeted, the main force of the troops and God Spirits were still here after all. The soldiers and God Spirits of the Blazing Sun Kingdom could not take them down for a while. I'll use you guys to test my universe-destroying blade. With a thought from Zhou, the complete universe-destroying blade appeared in his right hand. His body suddenly disappeared from the spot. In the next moment, he had already teleported in front of a high-tier deity-level elementary grade Scarlet God Spirit. When he saw Zhou appear in front of him, this high-tier deity-level elementary grade Scarlet God Spirit was immediately shocked. Even a semi-true God-tier elementary grade existence was not his match. How could he fight him? Without thinking, he waved the mid-tier deity-level advanced grade divine artifact in his hand, the Blood God Wood, and smashed it at Zhou with all his might. Then he wanted to escape. Unexpectedly, Zhou's casual slash actually directly cut off this mid-tier deity-level advanced grade divine artifact, and cut off the other party's head without losing momentum. High-tier deity-level elementary grade Scarlet God Spirit. Aloy didn't even have time to escape before he was killed by Zhou's saber. Chapter 876 Victory is almost here. What a good divine artifact. When Zhou saw this scene, he immediately looked at the universe-destroying blade in his hand, as if it was a treasure. In that slash just now, he did not even use any additional law skills. He only relied on the destructive power of the true God-tier divine artifacts to destroy this high-tier deity-level elementary God Spirit with his mid-tier deity-level advanced grade divine artifact as easily as cutting a cake. This was a feeling that the dimensional blade had never given him. However, he could also feel that with his current strength, he could only activate the divine artifact Law 1 of the universe-destroying blade, Supreme Destroying, and the divine artifact Law 3, Exterminating the Origin. As for the divine artifact Law 2, Universe Fall, he was far from being able to use it. It was estimated that only when he became a low-tier deity level, a mid-tier deity level, or even a high-tier deity level, then he could use the strongest divine artifact Law of this true God-tier advanced grade divine artifact. At the same time, when the other Scarlet God Spirits and Scarlet Soldiers saw Zhou kill a high-tier deity level Scarlet God Spirit with a single strike, they were completely terrified. That was a high-tier deity-level Scarlet God Spirit. In the hands of this King of the Blazing Sun, he actually died without even being able to withstand a single move. They were actually facing such a powerful enemy. If they had known this would happen, they would not have come. At this moment, they suddenly saw the King of the Blazing Sun. As they gently stroked the universe-destroying blade, they looked at the surrounding Scarlet God Spirits. An ominous feeling immediately surfaced in their hearts. Oh no! A few smart Scarlet God spirits had already given up on their current opponents and turned to escape into the distance. Trying to escape? Zhou grinned. He had yet to put away the two true God-tier methods of his 9 worlds God Demon Dreamfall Array and the Demon Abyss Spiderweb. Escape? Only with his approval. Then, he leisurely flew towards the fleeing Scarlet God spirits. Soon, he saw the Scarlet God spirits who were helpless against the 9 worlds Demon God Dreamfall Array. Surrender. Or die, Zhou said calmly to them. When the 7 or 8 Scarlet God spirits heard this, some of their eyes revealed hesitation, while others flickered. Some looked at Zhou with hatred and anger. I'd rather die and return to the Crimson Overlord than surrender to a puny human like you. A mid-tier deity-level Scarlet God spirit looked at Zhou and sneered. One day, the crown of the Crimson Overlord. Haha. Before he could finish speaking, he saw a gray saber beam flash past. Then, he saw the head of the mid-tier deity-level Scarlet God spirit fall off. Then, even its head and corpse were put into Zhou's king's treasure box. You're about to die. Why are you still talking so much? Zhou said calmly, and looked at the other Scarlet God spirits calmly. Kill. Use whatever methods you have. Don't hide anything. This king of the blazing sun has no intention of letting us off. A high-tier deity-level Scarlet God spirit suddenly roared angrily. The other God spirits also reacted and were furious. Then they took out all kinds of attacks and attacked Zhou. Zhou was stunned for a moment before shaking his head. He indeed wanted to leave behind a few Scarlet God spirits who were willing to surrender and join his territory to become his subordinates. After all, with the peaceful times around, Zhou did not have to worry about their loyalty, even if they were Scarlet God spirits. However, the high-tier deity-level Scarlet God spirit, who spoke clearly, wanted to pull the other Scarlet God spirits to fight with him. In the end, it directly disrupted his plan. Forget it. Since I can't subdue you, I'll accept your spoils of war. Zhou's body instantly disappeared from the spot. To his Lord Talent, the King of Loot, in fact, their spoils of war were more valuable than the God spirits themselves. A moment later, Zhou stored the corpses of these Scarlet God spirits into his king's treasure vault one by one, then turned around and flew towards the galaxy. He did not plan to interfere too much in the following battle. After all, to his subordinates, these Scarlet God spirits were worth 90 times their experience. The promotion energy was no longer useful to him. He would leave these large experience bags for his subordinates to use. However, it was not like he did not participate in the battle at all. In the following period of time, he would stay on the galaxy and control the changes on the entire battlefield, according to the information given to him by the endless spider webs of the Demon Abyss. Once the God spirits or heroes on his side encountered a life-threatening battle situation, he would use the true God-tier advanced grade law skill, Infinite Teleportation, that he had just mastered to teleport to the other party's side and save their lives. Under normal circumstances, the Infinite Teleportation law skill of a true God-tier advanced grade was enough to be like one thought universe. Not only could it teleport to any corner of the current world with a thought, but it was also used extremely frequently. It could even be used almost without intervals. After Zhou used the king, his realm could infinitely approach the level of an elementary grade true God tier. At this stage of strength, even if he couldn't achieve all the effects of the law skills of the true God tier advanced grade, it was still very easy to achieve infinite teleportation on a small scale on the current battlefield. Otherwise, if he turned a blind eye, the Holy Spirit tier faith divine crystals in his pocket would probably not be able to revive too many of his God spirits who had died. However, after this battle completely ended, these 5 billion fog monsters should provide him with a large number of Holy Spirit tier faith divine crystals. At that time, even if such a battlefield of the same scale appeared again, Zhou would not have to worry about not being able to revive completely after the battle. In the following period of time, the battle between the Lord of the Blazing Sun Kingdom and the allied forces of the Scarlet Army was still in full swing. However, ever since Zell died, The allied forces of the Scarlet Legion learned of Zhou Zhou's terrifying strength, and their morale began to decrease greatly. Zhou Zhou had clearly stopped interfering in the battlefield, but their morale was still low. Some of the Fog soldiers and Scarlet God spirits even began to escape in all directions. If Zhou Zhou had not set up the 9 Worlds Demon God Dreamfall array in advance, they would have really escaped from this battlefield. After discovering that they were trapped on the battlefield, these Fog soldiers and the Scarlet God spirit also knew that they had entered a dead end. Therefore, they began to counterattack crazily against Zhou Zhou's soldiers and God spirits. In the beginning, the gods on the Blazing Sun Kingdom's side really could not withstand the attacks of these Scarlet God spirits, who had unleashed their full combat strength without any worries. However, as Zhou Zhou used infinite teleportation and appeared in every corner of the battlefield, defeating these Scarlet God spirits one by one, the outcome of this war involving 10 billion soldiers and nearly 200 God spirits could be said to have been predetermined in advance. The scales of victory, accompanied by the death of one Scarlet God spirit after another, had slowly and firmly leaned towards the Blazing Sun Kingdom. Chapter 877, Becoming the Sixth Speaker. The powers and obligations of the speaker. Time passed quickly. The sky gradually darkened. Scarlet fog gradually appeared in the air. At this moment, the huge battlefield that covered a radius of 50,000 kilometers finally gradually calmed down with the destruction of the Scarlet Army's allied forces. The clergy, doctors, and other healers rushed to the battlefield to save the gods who had been injured and died in the war. As for the other uninjured soldiers, they were cooperating with Galaxy on the vast battlefield to collect the loots. There were a total of 5 billion Fog soldiers' corpses. Just collecting these was enough for Zhou Zhou's soldiers to spend a lot of time. Fortunately, with the 18 Galaxy, this speed could be greatly reduced. After the dust settled on the battlefield, Zhou Zhou slowly flew out of the galaxy and looked at the blood-colored battlefield that had completely changed. 5 billion corpses are lying on the ground, and blood is flowing for 100,000 miles. The current war alone has already developed to this extent. I wonder how tragic it will be when it involves the battle of the myriad worlds in the future. Zhou Zhou thought ruefully. This battle alone was enough to surpass all the battles in the history of the Cerulean planet or Earth. If he was still on the Cerulean planet or Earth, he would definitely become the #1 person in the history of war. At this moment, a large number of figures suddenly flew over from afar. Zhou Zhou looked over. It was Yang Jian Neza, the goddess of the Holy Land, and the other humans who had come to help the god spirits. Greetings, Sixth Speaker. The immortals of the human race were a little reserved and respectful. Their attitude was very different from before. They looked at Zhou Zhou with reverence. Even the arrogant immortals did not dare to show any disrespect to Zhou Zhou. The lord of all races in front of them was a super existence who had killed a semi-true god-tier elementary grade. It was equivalent to a Mahayana cultivator killing a Grand Luo cultivator. How could he be so heaven-defying? No matter how arrogant they would not be stupid to show their arrogance to an existence not only powerful, but also with a limitless future. You're too kind, everyone. Thank you for your help in this battle. I won't go back on the benefits I promised previously. When the time comes, everyone can choose the divine artifact you want. Zhou Zhou smiled at them. He naturally knew their attitude in his heart, but he didn't care. This battle could not have been won without the help of these god spirits in front of him. If he only relied on the god spirits under his command, the difficulty of this battle would definitely be 10 times higher than before. Not to mention anything else, even if he relied on his powerful strength to win against the many soldiers and god spirits under him in the end, most of his god spirits and experts would probably die in this battle. Unlike now, the main generals and heroes had only lost about 30% of their lives. They could be revived later, and the losses were almost negligible. On the other side, when the immortals heard this, their faces immediately revealed excitement and anticipation. Apart from helping the King of the Blazing Sun, wasn't the most important reason why they came here for the divine artifact? As long as they participated in the battle, They could obtain a divine artifact at low-tier deity level. They could even obtain an entire set of divine artifacts if they killed a scarlet god spirit. Even if he was injured or died in battle, he could obtain compensation from the divine artifact. Which god spirit could withstand such a test? Zhou smiled when he saw their expressions. Then he suddenly reacted and asked curiously, "What does the sixth speaker mean?" "Speaker, don't you know?" Yang Jian smiled and said, "Just now, the Yellow Emperor Patriarch Lu, and Bai he secretly watched the entire process of our battle, especially your battle. Therefore, they determined that you now officially have power comparable to a true god tier. In addition to your contributions and the special situation of the human race, the three members of royalty have decided to make an exception and upgrade your identity as an ordinary counselor to the status of speaker. Speaker, only the true god tier of the human race can take on the role. Therefore, you are now the sixth speaker of our human race. We just received this news." Zhou immediately opened his personal terminal and realized that there were indeed several new messages. They were all sent by the Yellow Emperor, Patriarch Lu, and Bai He. They all told Zhou that he was now the speaker of the human race and truly stood at the highest level of the human race. He was on par with the Yellow Emperor, Patriarch Lu, Bai He, and the Nirvana Buddha Lord. Zhou stroked his chin. Good God! He had just officially become a counselor yesterday, and his butt was not even warm yet. Today he was the speaker. Forget it. There was nothing to be conflicted about. It was a good thing after all. Your Excellency Bai He, what are the benefits of becoming the chairman? Zhou sent a message to Bai He curiously. Bai He, who was chatting with the Yellow Emperor and Patriarch Lu, smiled when he saw Zhou's question. Then he showed the news to the Yellow Emperor and Bai He. Little Bai, since our sixth speaker is curious, tell him. This is the power he deserves. The Yellow Emperor smiled. Bai He nodded and sent a message to Zhou. Zhou looked at the message sent by Bai He. Becoming the speaker of the human race has countless benefits for the human race. Let's not talk about the small benefits for now. I'll only talk about the biggest ones. At the same time, there are also benefits that you should be interested in. First, as the highest level speaker of the human race, each speaker has the power to command all the forces of the entire human race. As long as you see a human soldier, you have the right to order the other party to fight for you, even if the other party is a god spirit, or even a high-tier deity-level god spirit. Second, as the speaker of the human race, you have the right to buy any resources below the god spirit level at half price. The speaker of the human race could also buy resources from the low-tier deity level to the high-tier deity level at a 30% discount. As for resources at the true god tier level, it depended on the true god tier speaker's own wishes. They could be exchanged for items, given to each other for free, or bought at full price or at a discount. The true god tier speaker could discuss it himself. Third, the true god tier speaker has the right to dismiss and establish the emperor of the human empire. If the true god tier speaker is interested, he can even become the king of the empire himself to enjoy himself. Fourth, Bai He mentioned 7 or 8 benefits of becoming the speaker of the human race in a row, making Zhou's eyes turn red. There were actually so many benefits to becoming the speaker of the human race. Then he had to be a good speaker. At this moment, Bai He sent another message. Some of these powers might conflict with the Supreme Agreement, so when you want to use these powers, it's best to try in advance. Let's talk about rights for now. Let's talk about obligations now. There is only one obligation after becoming the speaker. That is to do your best to protect the human race. We humans will not use too many requests to restrict the true god tier speaker, because we believe that the true god tier speaker, who can be recognized by all the higher-ups of our human race, will definitely not let us humans down. The speaker must have a reason for doing whatever you do. When Zhou saw this, his heart suddenly felt heavy. He felt that the humans had sacrificed too much, but he also felt that doing this could indeed allow him to develop his Lord faction freely and fully. The existence that established these rights rules back then seemed to be very concerned about the speaker's own feelings. They were even willing to sacrifice some of the human race's interests to satisfy the speaker's needs. Under such circumstances, if the humans wanted to obtain benefits from the speaker, they could only rely on the speaker's self-awareness. If they encountered a vampire who only sucked blood without paying, the entire human race would probably suffer. However, Zhou was naturally not that kind of person. As a rich and imposing person, he disdained to take advantage of the human race in this aspect. After that, Zhou, Bai He, and the others chatted about many human matters and agreed to hold a human summit meeting after he dealt with the matters at hand. More than an hour later, the entire battlefield was cleaned up. Zhou and the others did not stay any longer. All of them boarded the galaxy and returned to the Blazing Sun Kingdom. Chapter 878 Spectating. Just as Zhou and the others led their troops back to the Blazing Sun Kingdom, the lords and native factions who had been watching in the dark continued to transmit what happened here to the outside world. Towards this, Zhou did not make things difficult for them, nor did he force them to not spread the news. There were too many life forms and factions watching the battle. Zhou knew that he could not stop them. Since that was the case, then he would openly let the lords of the various races know. This way, with his reputation spreading, it would save some nameless thieves from daring to come and take advantage of him. As for powerful enemies, as long as the true god tier did not descend, Zhou was not afraid of them at all. It could be said that, among the lords of all races, even if it was the true lord of the original spirit race, the great one lord of the chaos god race, the heaven-chasing lord of the Mu god race, or the lords of other high-level bloodline races, Zhou was no longer afraid. This was because he and the lords under him had developed too quickly, especially after the appearance of a true god tier like him. He was even more unafraid of these top lord of all races, who had once been terrifyingly powerful to him. Even if they joined forces and used all their trump cards to deal with him, Zhou would not be too worried that the other party would pose any threat to him. This was the super confidence brought about by super strength. In the current situation, they were the ones who should be afraid. Zhou's calm expression contained unparalleled confidence and domineeringness. "It's time for me to make the top lord of all races fear me," Zhou muttered. Just as he had expected, after he killed Occult Zell, a low-tier pseudo-true god tier, and won this unprecedented battle involving 10 billion soldiers and nearly 200 god spirits, all the lords and local factions fell silent. The Great One Lord, the Heaven-Chasing Lord, the Spiritual Venerable Lord, the Azura Lord, the Skeleton Lord, and the other top lord of all races looked at the domineering and dignified human figure in the video and felt an irresistible sense of despair. Even though they were all from top-notch bloodline races and had the foundation of countless races and civilizations behind them, their bloodlines made them innately several times better than other races. Fighting above their level was as simple as eating and drinking to them. The difficulty of becoming a god spirit was much lower than that of other low-level bloodline life forms. Even after becoming a god, their combat strength and future potential were stronger than gods of the same level. Frankly speaking, the difference between this bloodline was no longer just a small difference. But so what? The stalwart man in the video, even if he had nothing at the beginning, and was only a human from a low-middle-class bloodline, had now left them far behind after a very short period of development. He could not even see their exhaust. While they were still feeling smug at the extraordinary tier, epic tier, and legendary tier levels, the other party actually already had the combat power of a true god tier. He already had countless god spirits under his command, and the number of soldiers was calculated in billions. This difference was more than ridiculous. It was as if a big shot from the later stages of the version had suddenly descended in a newbie town that had just opened. It was simply suppression of an entirely new dimension. Could he be the son of the Supreme Will? How else could he develop so quickly? He even has so many god spirit level subordinates. The lords of all races who came from top-notch bloodlines could not help but let their imaginations run wild. Definitely not all the god spirits under King of the Blazing Sun belong to him. But even so, the other party can call over so many god spirits to fight for him, at the risk of their lives. This King of the Blazing Sun is also very impressive. I wonder what is the price he paid. The most terrifying thing is that the King of the Blazing Sun can actually defeat a true god, and have the strength of a true god tier. Even if it's only temporary, it's still unimaginable. Let me tell you a joke. Our Water Essence clan's ancestor, Blue Ancestor, is a low-level true god tier god spirit. However, I feel that our ancestor might not be able to defeat the King of the Blazing Sun in that state, just now because our ancestor doesn't have any true god tier divine artifacts. What's there to fight for? Just give the Lord of all races to the King of the Blazing Sun. Fortunately, I know my limits. Ever since I participated in the Lord of all races competition, I didn't think of fighting for the Lord of all races. If I also wanted to fight for the Lord of all races, I would have to enter seclusion for 100,000 years, and not want to come out after seeing this scene. You can't say that. The Lord of all races competition hasn't ended yet. It's still not certain who the Lord of all races will fall into the hands of. From the looks of it, the King of the Blazing Sun only temporarily has the combat power of a semi-true god tier elementary grade. In front of the great races and civilizations behind those top lords of all races, it's actually nothing. In their race, there are many master god tiers, let alone true god tier. You're going to invite him? The Lord of the Blazing Sun must be stupid to provoke the race civilization behind the Lord of all races. With the supreme agreement protecting him, King of the Blazing Sun can play however he wants in this myriad race competition, with his strength and Lord's faction. Who can stop him? The lords of the myriad races and the local lord factions began to discuss the topic of the King of the Blazing Sun previously. King of the Blazing Sun had relied on his human background to reach the top of the faction points ranking of the lords of all races. It had only attracted the attention of the lords of all races and the civilization of the myriad races. They had decided to find an opportunity to get rid of him. After this battle, the threat that the King of the Blazing Sun posed to the civilization behind the lords of all races and the lords of the myriad races instantly rose to a tricky level. He had only descended to the high continent for a short period of time, but he already had the combat strength of a true god tier. What would happen if he continued to develop? All the lords and civilizations knew that they had to get rid of the Lord of the Blazing Sun. They immediately contacted the lords of their race to discuss how to deal with the King of the Blazing Sun together. Even though they could not bypass the supreme agreement, they could still do some small tricks that could help their lord at some price. At the same time, their gazes were also fixed on the human faction behind the Lord of the Blazing Sun. There were countless races in the myriad worlds. As a high and mighty top-notch bloodline race, they did not have a deep impression of the human race in the past. They only vaguely remembered that there was a rather famous human Pangu, who was suspected to have grasped a high-level divine artifact. Later on, the other party disappeared without a trace, and the high-level divine artifact also disappeared without a trace. They could not remember the human race even more, and now, their gazes landed on the humans again. The supreme agreement made them temporarily unable to kill the Lord of the Blazing Sun. However, it was very easy for them to attack the entire human race, since they were only a middle-grade race with a few true god tiers. They only needed to mobilize a portion of their strength to easily destroy it. Chapter 879 Commodity The Blazing Sun Kingdom. As soon as Zhou returned, he asked Bai Yin to immediately bring the soldiers to Mugu to clean up today's ranchland continent. He had arrived on the high continent for so long, but this was the first time he had cleaned up the monster ranch so late. Then, he went to the gate of summoning alone and summoned the 18,800 people today. Then, he looked at the professions of these subjects and found that there were no special professionals worth paying attention to. He chatted with them briefly and arranged for them to be assigned to the officials before leaving. Then he rushed to the Lord's shop. "Old Zhou, what goods are you selling today?" Zhou asked directly. At this moment, Zhou Chengmin was sitting on the latest esports chair produced by the Blazing Sun Kingdom. He was wearing a virtual gaming helmet and swimming in the sea of games. He reluctantly came to the speechless Zhou Zhou when he heard the sound. Old Zhou, men can't be addicted to games every day. Everything in moderation. Zhou Zhou said, Your Majesty, not everyone is as ambitious as you every day. I'm just an old man guarding a shop. I sell goods every day and barely survive. I play games in my free time. What's wrong with that? I don't have a large group of subjects to manage. I can't be in a daze when I'm free, right? That will cause Alzheimer's. Zhou Chengmin said lazily. Zhou Zhou was speechless. He could not help but feel envious. But when he thought about everything he had now, he felt a little relieved. He had to pay the price for what he wanted. He did not regret his choice. As the two of them spoke, Zhou Chengmin had already taken out 3 golden boxes from the counter and placed them on the counter. Zhou Zhou opened them one by one and looked at them. The first golden box contained a sky blue heart. Zhou Zhou looked over and realized that it was the bloodline of the Wind God Dragon from the original New Wind Demon Kingdom. Bloodline name: Wind God Dragon Bloodline. Bloodline level: True God Tier Elementary Grade. Bloodline effect: the user can obtain an Epic Tier Advanced Grade Bloodline, Golden Dragon Bloodline. After absorbing it, the user will gradually awaken some Golden Dragon race abilities during their growth after fusing with this bloodline. The second golden box contained a shrunken Epic Tier Advanced Grade weapon. Zhou Zhou took a look and realized that it was an Epic Tier shield of the Yellow Gold Tier God Attendant. He ignored it. The third box contained a Divine Spark fragment. Zhou Zhou looked over and realized that it was one of Wu Zhen's skills. Imperial Dragon. Skill name: Imperial Dragon. Skill quality: Low-tier deity level intermediate grade. Skill description: creatures who have mastered the ability to control dragons can sign a contract with a dragon-type creature, allowing the master of the dragon to grow together with a dragon-type creature. Moreover, as long as the master of the dragon doesn't die, the dragon controlled won't die either. At the same time, the dragon who signed the contract will never betray the master of the dragon. This Imperial Dragon is interesting. Not only can we grow together, but we can also let the dragons who signed the contract avoid the death tribulation when the master of the tamed dragon is not dead. However, which dragon should I sign a contract with? Zhou Zhou began to think. This Imperial Dragon contract was very special. It was extremely beneficial to both sides. However, correspondingly, the Imperial Dragon Master could only use the Imperial Dragon contract to contract one dragon in his life. Otherwise, even if you were the legendary Master God tier, you would not be able to use the Imperial Dragon contract to contract a second dragon. Of course, he could also use other contract methods to contract the dragon race. For example, summoners, contractors, secret beast masters, spirit pet envoys. They all had various methods to contract pets. However, there were no benefits like the Imperial Dragon contract. The first thing that appeared in his mind was the light sacred dragon, Ingersoll. As a legendary dragon, it was definitely qualified to be contracted by Zhou Zhou. However, after some thought, he gave up on this idea. He already had the bloodline of the light sacred dragon. Contracting the light sacred dragon might not necessarily bring him much improvement. If he should contract with a legendary dragon that he had never seen before. And it would be best if it was the strongest legendary dragon. Zhou Zhou suddenly thought of something, and his gaze landed on the regal sacred Dao sword at his waist. In terms of the strongest legendary dragon, Ao Zun, the regal dragon who had given him the regal sage Dao sword, definitely had something to say. "Are you there, Your Excellency Ao Zun?" His eyes darted around as he tried to transmit his thoughts to the regal sage Dao sword. However, his thoughts were like stones sinking into the sea. He did not receive any response. Zhou Zhou looked a little disappointed. It seemed that Ao Zun's main body was not on the regal Saint Dao sword, so he could only wait. Zhou Zhou made up his mind to meet Ao Zun in the future. If he did not agree to become his contract partner, it would not be too late for him to find another legendary dragon contract. "How much are these 3 items worth?" Zhou Zhou asked. True God tier elementary grade Wind God Dragon Bloodline is worth 20,000 legendary tier Mist Cores. The Epic tier intermediate grade Mountain Guardian Shield is worth 50 Epic tier Mist Cores. Low tier deity level intermediate grade Dragon Taming Skill, worth 1,000 legendary tier Mist Cores. Zhou Qingmen said. Zhou did not waste his breath when he heard this. He took out 21,000 legendary tier Mist Cores and bought all the Wind God Dragon Bloodline and Dragon Taming skills. As for the intermediate grade Epic tier Mountain Guardian Shield, it was also bought by Zhou, who was a little obsessive-compulsive. Thank you for your support, boss. Zhou Qingmen chuckled and put away Mist Core. Then, he sat back on his esports chair, put on his virtual gaming helmet, and continued playing the game. Zhou shook his head. However, he did not say anything this time. He left with these 3 goods and returned to the advanced grade Lord's Paradise. Then, he entered a cultivation room and directly absorbed this true God tier elementary grade Wind God Dragon Bloodline. Soon, a cool and free power was born in his heart and surged to various parts of his body. Lines of text slowly appeared. You have absorbed 1 Wind God Dragon, true God tier elementary grade. Your Chaos Human bloodline has been unearthed with more potential. Your 6 senses have been slightly strengthened. You have awakened the true God tier elementary grade Wind God Dragon talent, Wine God Blessing. You have awakened the true God tier elementary grade Wind God Dragon talent, Son of the Wind God. You have awakened the true God tier elementary grade Wind God Dragon talent, Elementalization Wind. You have grasped the true God tier elementary grade Wind God Dragon Law skill, Heavenly Wind Splitting God. You have grasped the true God tier elementary grade Wind God Dragon Law skill, Wind Source Break. You have grasped the true God tier elementary grade Wind God Dragon Law skill, Howling Wind. You have grasped the Wind God Dragon race's common knowledge inheritance. You have grasped the secret inheritance of the Wind God Dragon race. Zhou nodded slightly. Even though the fusion this time did not improve his low-tier deity level advanced grade bloodline further, he could feel that his Chaos Human bloodline was getting closer and closer to the mid-tier deity level elementary grade. Chapter 880 Ranking. Gagasan Sight Surrender. After Zhou finished absorbing the bloodline, he opened the Lord of All Races Faction Points ranking. Lord of All Races Faction Points ranking. First place. Human, Lord of the Blazing Sun, 1,899,000,000 faction points. Second place. Original Spirit Race, True Lord, 1,530,000,000 faction points. Third place. Shepherd's God Race, Heaven Chasing Lord, 1,050,000,000 faction points. Fourth place. Chaos Gods Race, Great One Lord, 625,000,000 faction points. Fifth place. Spiritual Venerable Lord, 510,000,000 faction points. Zhou nodded in satisfaction. The reason why his faction points could soar to nearly 1.9 billion was because today he, his soldiers, and the god spirits had actually found 4 targets that the Eye of the Heavens Anger had identified among the allied forces of the Scarlet Army. After these targets were killed, he actually obtained a total of 630,000,000 faction points. He really did not expect this. It was also because of these 630,000,000 faction points that his faction points suddenly broke through to this level and continued to maintain the position of number 1. However, when he saw the faction points obtained by the lords of the original spirit race and the other races, his pupils constricted slightly before he gradually frowned. They actually obtained so many points. They actually didn't pull too far away from me? How did he do it? Zhou was very puzzled. With his current strength and number of experts, in addition to the Eye of the Heavens Anger, even if they were top-notch lords and had the foundation of countless races and civilizations, they should have been crushed by him in terms of obtaining faction points. Looking at it now, there was actually not much of a difference. Zhou remembered. The last time he reached the top, the true lord of the original spirit race only had 800,000,000 faction points. In just over a day, his faction points had actually increased by leaps and bounds to 1.53 trillion. He gained more than 700,000,000 faction points. How did he do that? There was also the Shepherd's God race, the Chaos God's race, the Myriad Spirit race. The faction points of these top lords had also increased by leaps and bounds. Furthermore, they were all increasing by hundreds of millions a day. Zhou pondered for a moment and could not think of anything. Hence, he took out the Bodhi Supreme and asked this question. This question requires one ordinary question. Bodhi Supreme said lazily. Sure. Zhou agreed without hesitation. The number of times he could solve ordinary questions was not a problem for him, who had a large number of people of foreign races' bloodline inheritance. Through the continuous installation of questions in his free time over the past few days, he had already solved 3 ordinary questions. As for the higher level of official explanations, after Zhou gave the Wisdom Demon crown to the other party, there were still 2 more times. Zhou had yet to use them. When Bodhi Supreme saw that Zhou had agreed, he told him the reason why these high-level bloodline races could obtain so many faction points in such a short period of time. After Zhou heard this, his expression darkened. According to Bodhi Supreme, the true Lord, the Great One Lord, the Heaven-Chasing Lord, and the other lords at the top of the rankings all used the same method to increase their faction points when they saw that Zhou could actually surpass them and take first place. That was to contact other lords of the same race and ask them to pass the faction quests that they were doing or had already done to him. Under such circumstances, they only needed to take over and do a small number of missions. They could complete several faction quests in a short period of time and obtain a large number of faction points. This was also why Zhou saw that the faction points of these top-notch lords were not much different from his own faction points, and all they had to pay for it were some insignificant benefits in their eyes. If you can't win, you'll get external help, right? And all at once, Zhou really had no temper towards their method of increasing his faction points. However, he soon realized that he could do the same. Moreover, he was now the 6th speaker of the human race, and had the highest authority in the human race. Doing such a thing was much simpler than them. With an order, countless human factions would naturally run errands for him. And it wasn't just the humans. He could also look for people of foreign races, who were close to the human race and purchase faction points missions from them, to obtain a large number of faction points in a short period of time. At most, he would just pay more miscores. In any case, he did not lack this. This method was much more convenient and efficient than personally obtaining faction points. It saved time and effort. You can raise this idea when the human race's supreme conference is held today. Zhou thought. After resting for a while, he sent someone to call over the spellcaster who had mastered Insight Surrender. This spellcaster's name was Gaga, and his strength was at the legendary tier advanced grade. His race was the spirit of the yellow sky that had been transformed into a fog monster. His main profession was a yellow talisman Dao soldier, and his secondary profession was a spellcaster. It was about 3 to 4 meters tall and floated in midair. It was wearing a golden robe and had scarlet eyes. Its figure was a little like a spirit body, but in fact its body structure was a flesh and blood spirit constitution, formed by the fusion of a spirit body and a flesh and blood body. Yellow ancient talismans floated around it, engraved with mysterious talismans that emitted a faint nomological aura. Zhou looked at the talismans curiously. This should be the greatest inheritance of the civilization, developed by the spirit of Yellow Heaven, Yellow Talisman. At the same time, this Yellow Talisman was also the source of power for the Empire-level soldier type, the Yellow Talisman Dao Soldier. It could allow Yellow Talisman Dao soldiers to use the nomological power that only God spirits could use in advance before becoming God spirits. Even though the power of the nomological laws could only increase their physical bodies, making their physical bodies extremely powerful and their close combat ability extremely strong, it was average in terms of long-range attacks. However, it was enough to make countless low-level bloodline races look up to it. "Greetings, Your Majesty," Gaga said respectfully. Smiling face was calm and composed. "From now on, you will temporarily be incorporated into the Blazing Sun Army. As the strategist of the Blazing Sun Army, you will carry out the work of a strategist. In the future, if you need to appear to recruit enemies, you can appear again. Zhou thought for a moment. There were no opposing forces that urgently needed him to incite surrender. So he said this. Your Majesty, can I serve under you? Gaga asked. You probably won't have a chance to make a contribution if you stay by my side. Instead, it will bury your talent. Stay by the Blazing Sun Army's side. It's the Blazing Sun Kingdom's first legion. You will experience the most battles, obtain the most military merits, and be promoted the fastest. That's the stage for you to show off your skills. Zhou rejected outright. In the next few days, he was prepared to focus on comprehending the Lord's laws and strive to advance to the God Spirit realm as soon as possible. He did not plan to personally interfere in small-scale battles. He would leave them to Bai Yun and the others to handle. Under such circumstances, he naturally did not plan to bring Gaga along. Chapter 881 Incite Surrender and Bargaining Chips. Yes, Your Majesty. Gaga agreed as usual, but felt a little regretful. As a smart strategist, it naturally knew that by following the king, it could rely on its ability to argue and scheme to gain the king's recognition the fastest. However, since the king didn't need him now, he could only use his ability to open the way. Fortunately, he was confident in his ability. There were also benefits, even though this would be slower. It was safe and did not attract gossip. At the same time, Zhou also opened Gaga's attribute list. He took a rough look and realized that they were all strategists' common skills such as assessing the situation, inciting, encouragement, military planning, and policy coordination. There were also spellcaster-specific skills such as eloquence, sophistry, expression analysis, psychological estimation, and shouting to stop. He roughly read through it. After understanding Gaga's abilities, his gaze landed on the most important skill. Incite Surrender. Skill name. Incite Surrender. Skill quality. Special, legendary tier advanced grade. Skill description. A unique derivative ability bestowed by the Lord Talent Incite Defection. Only spellcasters created by this Lord Talent can master and use it. Spellcaster, who had Incite Surrender, could be sent into the enemy camp by his lord to carry out Incite Surrender. During the Incite Surrender mission, Spellcaster had a 10% chance of making all the members of the enemy lord's camp his loyal subordinates. Note 1. Currently, Spellcasters can at most recruit lords below the legendary tier advanced grade in the main territory. This ability will increase as Spellcaster levels up. Note 2. After Spellcaster uses Incite Surrender, he will be allowed to rest for up to 7 days a day. The exact cultivation time depends on Spellcaster's mental endurance. Note 3. The Lord can increase Spellcaster's Incite Surrender success rate by increasing the bargaining chips in his hands. Note 4. Incite Surrender is risky. You have to be careful when using it. After reading it, Zhou raised his eyebrows slightly. He looked at Gaga. What's the bargaining chip to increase the success rate of Incite Surrender? He asked. Gaga smiled and explained. Your Majesty, the chips are divided into tangible and intangible. There are many tangible bargaining chips, such as valuable treasures, mist cores, divine weapons, beauties, rare materials. There are also many intangible bargaining chips. For example, whether our Lord's power is strong or not, how much official position we can give to the living beings who have been instigated by the Incite defection, or how much psychological pressure we can give to the other party. Simply put, if Your Majesty needs me to instigate the Incite defection, just tell me how many benefits you can give the other party within the scope of my authority. I will naturally act according to my ability. On the premise that I can win the other party over to our side, I will try my best to save the chips that our side will pay through my intelligence, eloquence, and professional ability. If I encounter some stupid enemies, I can even use my intelligence and eloquence to recruit the other party's troops and war resources without paying any price. I can make a deal of Incite Surrender without bargaining chip. I see. Zhou came to a realization. Isn't this a scam? I like it. Then what's the risk of Incite Surrender? Zhou asked, even though he already had a guess. In most cases, the insight surrender requires spellcaster to go alone. There may be accidents during this process. For example, if the insight surrender fails, it will bring about a fatal disaster. Another example is if we encounter difficult enemy subordinates during the insight surrender process. This is the risk that spellcaster and I might encounter during the process of using the insight surrender. But in this world, how can there be no risk in doing anything? You might even get sick from eating and drinking the most ordinary food. His Majesty is facing billions of enemies every day. The risk is billions of times greater than mine. So you don't have to worry about my safety, Your Majesty. You just need to get your subordinates to make the corresponding preparations when I undergo insight surrender. I only hope that there will be no worries. Leave the rest to me, Gaga said sincerely. Don't worry about that. This king will specially send a group of professionals to help you, so that you won't have any worries. Zhou immediately said, Thank you, Your Majesty. Actually, if I can become a spellcaster under a powerful lord like Your Majesty, I'll naturally have a huge advantage when I carry out insight surrender in the future. It'll save me a lot of effort. I think the insight surrender process should be very smooth and effortless in the future. Gaga smiled. Zhou chuckled and chatted with Gaga for a while about the specific usage of insight surrender before Gaga took his leave. Not long after he left, Aaliyah came over and said that Bai Yin wanted to see him. When Zhou heard this, he asked the other party to meet him in the study. Your Majesty, these are the total gains after today's war, as well as the overall report on the improvement of our soldiers' strength. This is the corpse of all the Scarlet God spirits and legendary tier fog monsters. Bai Yin clicked on her personal terminal and projected the report in front of the two of them. Then, she handed a spatial ring to Zhou. When Zhou saw this virtual projection, he praised it in his heart. This was a new function that his personal terminal had just updated today. It could be said to be very practical. It had to be said that as his Machina race clone continued to send Wunya all kinds of new technological information from the Machina race's territory, the technology level of the Blazing Sun Kingdom was developing rapidly at every moment. He stopped thinking about it and looked at the general report. In the past 2 days, they had first eliminated the 1 billion fog monsters of the New Wind Demon Kingdom. Then, they had helped the Saha Empire eliminate about 900 million fog monsters. Then, they had fought with the allied forces of the Scarlet Army. After eliminating a total of 3 billion fog monsters, they had finally eliminated the 1 billion ranch monsters in the ranch plain. In total, they had killed a total of 2 billion fog monsters. If it was not someone who was personally involved, it was hard to imagine that this was the result of only 2 days. However, firstly, Zhou only used his advantages to crush the opponents in most situations. There would not be a situation where he could not win the battle for a long time. Secondly, with the Galaxy, a super spaceship that could travel quickly, chase, and bring its own super radar, it saved a lot of traveling time and time to chase after the enemy. Thirdly, the top combatants on Zhou's side could often kill the enemy's top combatants first, thus lowering the enemy's morale. Not long after the war began, the ordinary soldiers of the enemy lost the confidence to win. This was the prerequisite for a quick victory. Coupled with the abundance of war resources, the high individual combat quality of the soldiers, and the suppression of the combat strength of the god spirits, it resulted in the magnificent feat of Zhou's 4 billion soldiers, destroying an army of more than 6 billion fog monsters in 2 days. Chapter 882 War Summary 1. These enemies were enhanced by the titles of the King of Loots and the Strongest Lord. They obtained a total of 87,900,000 legendary tier mist cores, 856,500,000 epic tier mist cores, more than 10.011 billion extraordinary tier mist cores, more than 14.26 billion diamond tier mist cores, more than 20.016 billion white platinum tier mist cores, more than 35.066 billion yellow gold tier mist cores, more than 88. 0.33 billion white silver tier MISC cores, and more than 165.05 billion green bronze tier MISC cores, more than 800 billion skill books and 1.68 trillion equipment. The basic materials alone totaled about 30,000 trillion units. There were more than 210 million units of basic elemental gem resources, more than 60 million units of thunder element gems, more than 40 million units of life elemental gems, more than 50 million units of death elemental gems, 1,030 million origin crystals, 17,706,520 green bronze tier Lord Talent crystal fragments, 12,500 Holy Spirit tier scarlet divine crystals, more than 80,000 intact dimensional cannons, more than 10,000 dimensional cannons with different degrees of damage. Zhou's gaze landed on the resources of the life elemental gems and the death elemental gems, and a look of joy appeared on his face. With so many life elemental gems and death elemental gems, I finally fulfilled another condition for my territory to advance to the epic tier elementary grade. Now that I only have 36 extraordinary tier territory tokens left, I can upgrade my territory. He muttered to himself. There were only 36 extraordinary tier territories. With his current military strength, he could easily conquer 36 beginner Crimson Kingdom. Under normal circumstances, a beginner kingdom would at most have 2 to 3 million troops. The 36 beginner kingdoms would only have 60 to 70 million troops. At most, they would have less than 100 million troops. Even if these kingdoms had God Spirit level trump cards, they should only be low-tier and mid-tier deity-level treasures. To the God Spirits of the Blazing Sun Kingdom, they were naturally not a threat. Zhou could easily deal with an enemy of this level. Then, he looked at the improvement of the army and soldiers. After 2 consecutive days of war, the level of the 4 armies under him had already increased greatly. Among them, the Kingdom Army of the Blazing Sun Army had jumped to the epic tier. Even though the Monster Army and the Dragon God Army could not compare to the Blazing Sun Army, they had reached the level of the Extraordinary Tier Kingdom Army. As an army that gathered intelligence, the Heavenly Map Army had the smallest increase in level, but it had also reached the Diamond Tier level. The greatest benefit of leveling up the army was that the effect of the army's buff and braveness had increased greatly. The Blazing Sun Army's epic tier braveness could increase the soldiers' overall strength by 80% in battle. The extraordinary tier braveness and diamond tier braveness of the other 3 legions increased their strength by 70% and 60%. This kind of improvement was shocking even for the soldiers of the Blazing Sun Kingdom. Then he looked at the list of troops behind him. Just by relying on the insight defection, Zhou had instigated a total of 236,544,581 fog monster soldiers. In addition to the 20% insight defection troops handed over to him by the Lord members of the Star Alliance, there were a total of 297,127,976 fog monster soldiers, as well as the 1.2 billion Violent Storm Spirit Class Change Certificate and 1.2 billion Yellow Gold Tier God Attendant Class Change Certificate that Bai Yin had just obtained from the Ranchland Plain. She had summoned 1.2 billion Violent Storm Spirit recruits and 1.2 billion Yellow Gold Tier God Attendant recruits through the Gate of Summoning. The total number of soldiers under his command had already reached 7,285,764,124, including the Star Alliance's current total military strength of more than 1.721 billion. Zhou's total military strength had already reached a terrifying 9 billion. Among the troops under his command, excluding the Star Alliance, there were 2,424,059,965 Black Iron Tier soldiers, 21,678,836 Green Bronze Tier soldiers, 1,728,239,680 White Silver Tier soldiers, 1,390,200,680 Yellow Gold Tier soldiers, 1,055,626,800 White Platinum Tier soldiers, 453 million Diamond soldiers, 158,598,290 extraordinary tier soldiers, 54 million epic tier soldiers, and 361,762 legendary tier soldiers. As for the god spirits under him, after today's battle, their strength had also increased astonishingly. Among them, Hera's strength had advanced to the high-tier deity level advanced grade. Zaiwu had advanced to the mid-tier deity level intermediate grade. Guoqiao, Qi Xiantian, and Yuan Song had advanced to mid-tier deity level elementary grade. Vicky, Bai Yin Wu Xian, Feng Luo Suan, and Luo Sheng had all advanced to the low-tier deity level intermediate grade. Even the strength of the 4 Scarlet God Spirits had increased by a small level. And to Zhou Zhou's surprise and satisfaction, after today's battle, the Dragon King of Volcano and Destruction, Nazario, the Dragon King of War and Strength, Ji Long, and the original Spirit Race, Ansel had all broken through to the low-tier deity level elementary grade. This brought the total number of God Spirits under his command to 18. If the God Spirits outside knew about this improvement, their jaws would probably drop. However, he knew what he was doing. The reason why Blazing Sun Kingdom was able to have so many God Spirits advance at the same time was of course thanks to the legendary tier Lord talent, Blessing of the War God. But more importantly, the God Spirits under Zhou Zhou had more or less used the Divine Spark fragment provided by the King of Lutes, and even the Book of the God Spirit. These God-tier treasures that could increase their nomological comprehension, after they were used by them, they turned into their own nomological comprehension, saving them a lot of time to comprehend the nomological laws. On this foundation, there was also the help of the huge difference in the time flow of the Reincarnation Sacred Palace. There were also various treasures that assisted in comprehending the laws. Under such circumstances, their own law comprehension and promotion energy had both met the requirements for advancement. Then their advancement would come naturally. Zhou Zhou was also very satisfied with this result. Fortunately, he had given away all the experience packs. Otherwise, if he killed randomly, he would feel good, but he would probably not be able to see such a wondrous scene of God spirits advancing one after another. Then, Zhou Zhou looked at the consumption of energy in this battle. The first was the consumption of Faith Divine Crystals. After this battle, the number of Blazing Sun Kingdom soldiers sacrificed exceeded a quarter of the total number of soldiers. In order to revive these soldiers, the clergymen had used more than half of the Faith Divine Crystals they had previously stored. Among the God Spirits on their side, 22 had also fallen. Among the 22 God Spirits, there were 8 low-tier deity level elementary grade God Spirits, 4 low-tier deity level intermediate grade God Spirits, 3 low-tier deity level advanced grade God Spirits, 3 mid-tier deity level intermediate grade God Spirits, and 4 mid-tier deity level advanced grade God Spirits. This was the result of Zhou Zhou using the demonic abyss spiderweb and infinite teleportation to control the entire battlefield and try his best to protect his God Spirits from dying. Otherwise, if he did not protect the God Spirits on his side, and only let the God Spirits on his side face the Scarlet God Spirits, who had fallen into a state of madness in a desperate situation alone, the losses of the God Spirits in this battle would at least increase by 3 to 4 times. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.